the man merely bit a level 5 knackle to death. This completely stunned one of humanity's top powerhouses, because the knackle the man killed was not taken out in a single blow, but rather bled to death alive after having its neck bitten off. Known to the world as humanity's ultimate weapon, this powerhouse had never seen a knacklist like this in their 60 years of service. It is important to note that knackles possess extremely strong regenerative abilities within the yellow dust. Aside from chopping off their heads, which kills them, they are completely immortal. What's more, the man before him was merely a lowly level 1 knacklist. Moreover, in this world, the conditions for every knacklist to awaken are extremely harsh, and the level of the ability matches the level of the knackle, so the ability level of knackle users is fixed and cannot undergo so-called evolution. At this moment, I, Maruhan, 29 years old, was just an unemployed graduate living off my parents at home. Because I suffered from panic disorder, I began hallucinating horrifying images and seeing a faint memory of myself, which led me to failing the civil service exams for 5 consecutive years. I went home and cried because of my misfortune. At this moment, my petite mother arrived at my apartment. She continued to support me unconditionally, even giving me extra allowance. Hearing that I didn't pass the interview once again, she felt like the shaman she visited could have been right. They claimed that the reason for my exam failures wasn't my panic disorder, but rather the fact that my father died away from home. It turns out that my father passed away in the mountain we frequently visited, and his spirit was blocking my way forward. The shaman claimed that if I just went up the mountain to pour wine for my father and comfort his soul, I would be able to pass the civil service exam. So, the next day, I took a boat back to my old hometown on the mountain. Opening the familiar courtyard gate, I seemed to see my childhood self again, along with my father's bizarre behavior that day. His distorted face bore a terrifying look, and his wide-open mouth muttered something I couldn't understand. Standing at the door of the room, my panic disorder struck once again. The pain and discomfort in my heart wouldn't stop, and I could only alleviate the unease by breathing in and out rapidly. After feeling better, I took a bottle of wine from my backpack to pay my respects to my father by pouring it out. Of course, I didn't believe my father was actually dead, but my panic disorder was indeed triggered by him. Just in case, I decided to also pray to the local mountain god. However, just as I was praying to the mountain god, a cloud of yellow dust unexpectedly began to fill the surroundings. Could the mountain be on fire? I quickly grabbed my backpack and hurried down the mountain. After all, safety comes first. But at the exact same time, I heard a loud call of safety first, which made me suddenly startle and freeze in place. I looked toward the source of the sound, and a bizarre figure emerged amidst the thick yellow dust. I looked at that dark silhouette with some confusion, until it fully revealed itself. It was a monster with a mangled head and a swollen belly, holding a bamboo pole. I rubbed my eyes vigorously, thinking I was hallucinating. Yet when I opened my eyes again, the monster was even closer to me. Realizing the danger, I quickly moved my feet, wanting to escape. However, in the very next moment, a bamboo pole pierced right through my abdomen. The intense pain made me fall to my knees with a thud. Is this how I die? I've never even had a chance to enjoy life yet. But thinking of my petite and gentle mother, I snapped awake once again. I couldn't die yet. I still had reasons to live. Gritting my teeth and enduring the severe pain, I stood up, but the knackle had already appeared in front of me. It suddenly lunged towards me. In that moment, I saw something in its big mouth. There was actually an eye inside. It clamped its legs tightly around my waist and opened its bloody maw toward my shoulder. Its sharp teeth pierced through my clothes and into my flesh, causing a tearing sensation that seeped even into my very soul. As I felt like I was about to pass out from the pain, I seemed to clearly hear the fragmented muttering of my father from that day. In a demonic tone, he commanded me to eat it. At this time, my instinct had taken over my body. I had subconsciously bitten into the knackle's neck, and without hesitation, I pulled it back to tear it open, and blood sprayed out like a fountain, accompanied by the knackle's agonizing screams. The eye within the knackle's mouth began to erupt a dark energy, overflowing from within the eye, causing my consciousness to drift into a strange scene. There was a pit of blood-red creatures, and on top of the creatures, they were eating one of their own kind. I saw all of this as the devoured creature began fighting back. When I opened my eyes again, I found a man and a woman standing in front of me. I sat up in a shock. It turns out that monster, along with the yellow dust, had vanished completely. Just as I was feeling confused, the man wearing a colorful shirt anxiously asked what I had seen. I told him that a wave of yellow dust suddenly spread, and a monster appeared and pierced my stomach. After saying that, I quickly checked my abdomen, only to find that my supposedly pierced stomach was now completely intact. Diakman Go and Jaiwan Yin exchanged a glance. Yesterday, the alert for the knackle's appearance had stopped right after it rang. They thought it was a malfunction, but the only explanation right now was that I was the one that killed the knackle. However, Jaiwan Yin still doubted, because even if a human had consumed the blood of a knackle and gained its powers, they wouldn't be able to use their abilities immediately. But Diakman Go beside her seemed unbothered. He asked if I remembered what had happened yesterday. Hearing this, I took out my phone. I was completely shocked that I was unconscious for a whole day. Diakman Go figured that if I survived a knackle, it meant that I absorbed its powers on the day of the new employee training. However, Jaiwan Yun on the side still had concerns. However, he dismissed this, saying that I would learn on the way as they did. Smiling playfully, Diakman Go threw his arm around my shoulder and said I should attend the new employee training day. Hearing this, I seemed to have no choice in the matter. Later, back in the village, at the G Island Yellow Dust Task Force building, it turns out that it was the welcome orientation for the Special Civil Service. At this moment, I was still bewildered by everything. Looking at the strange expressions of everyone in the venue, I couldn't quite understand why I was brought here. Right at that moment, the sound of clicking footsteps came from outside the door. It turns out that she was Yang Eun-yu, the city headquarters vice director, and she welcomed everyone to the Special Civil Service of the Ministry of Environment. Seeing someone in charge arrive, I hastily raised my hand. I seem to have come to the wrong place. You are incorrect. According to the G Island team's report, from today onwards, you are officially enlisted to the Special Civil Service. This greatly shocked me, because I never even applied. Yang Eun-yu continued, the most important aspect of the work for the Ministry of Environment's Special Civil Service is confidentiality. Whether it was family, relatives, or absolutely anyone else, you can't leak the slightest detail. Otherwise it would be a violation of the national security law, and you would face legal punishment. She began explaining the current situation. All of you rookies have attained powers from the knackle. In rare cases, when knackle blood is absorbed by the body, their powers are also absorbed. This makes you special individuals, known as knackleist. As I was about to voice out my concern, I remember that I had actually bitten into the monster from before. Fortunately, the knackle only appear in uninhabited mountains, but when they do appear, so does the yellow dust. The yellow dust concentration is measured on a scale of 1 to 10. The higher the level, the stronger and more dangerous the knackle. She called out a man named Eden Sienwu. This man has the powers of a level 7 knackle. Considering its high level, we have big hopes for you. The man named Eden Sienwu affirmed this, claiming he would do his best. Meanwhile, she once again checked her clipboard. Our most recent enlistee is Maruhan. You are a level 1 knackleist, so what is your power? Hearing this, I helplessly revealed that I didn't even know about any powers. Just then, an alarm started blaring loudly. This meant that a knackle had appeared at that moment. Having only been in the orientation for a few minutes, we were hurriedly rushed up the mountain by Vice Director Yang Eun-yu. She wanted to take this opportunity to give us practical training and show our powers in battle. Soon, the yellow dust became visible again. Inside this yellow dust, we found a knackle over 3 meters tall pinned to a rock by a woman using a sword. I was so frightened on the spot that I collapsed onto the ground. The other newcomers were also quite terrified by the sight. However, Vice Director Yang Eun-yu suddenly announced loudly that the practical training started right now. She explained that although the knackle in front of us looked massive, it was the weakest kind, a level 1 knackle. To further put our minds at ease, Chana Kong nearby had already stabbed a blade into its head, completely immobilizing it. After saying that, she told us to use our respective abilities to fight the knackle. Meanwhile, Chana Kong looked at me in the crowd with some confusion, curious about what ability I had obtained to be able to kill a knackle the moment I gained my powers. What she didn't know was that at this moment, I felt they must all be insane. Asking me to fight such a behemoth was an absolute joke. Just facing its aura triggered my panic disorder. But this time, the panic attack felt different from the past. My chest only hurt for a moment before I felt an unusual sense of extreme hunger. Furthermore, a massive black monster quietly appeared behind me, resting a dark hand on my head, opening its fierce yellow eyes. It only said 2 words to me: eat it. In the next second, my saliva flowed uncontrollably, and my mind was entirely consumed by the urge to eat that knackle. Suddenly, a hand tapped on my shoulder, and I jolted awake immediately. It turned out to be Eden Sienwu. He asked if I was crying from fear, but I was completely oblivious to what had just happened. Wiping the drool from my mouth, I answered that I was just a little hungry, which earned a look of disdain from him. He clearly thought I was a complete loser. Vice Director Yang Eun-yu stood at an elevated position to gather everyone, stating she had some precautions to explain before the fight. She told us to pay attention to the thick yellow dust around us, which was something spat out by the knackles. The higher the knackles level, the higher the concentration of the yellow dust it spewed. Within the yellow dust, knackles also possessed extremely strong regenerative abilities. As she spoke, she pulled out a small knife and made a cut on the palm of her hand, but the wound healed rapidly at an astonishing speed. This meant that as knackleists, we could also gain healing abilities within the yellow dust. However, whether a knackleist or a knackle, taking a fatal wound would still result in death. The most important point was that we knackleists could only use our powers within the yellow dust. Once out of it, we were no different from ordinary humans. Yet, Vice Director Yang Eun-yu's explanation seemed like complete nonsense to Eden Sienwu. He secretly bit his lip to break the skin, allowing the yellow dust to surge into his body through the wound. A burst of power instantly erupted within him. He then put on his gloves and abruptly activated his ability. With the sound of a finger snapping, the iron blade planted in the knackle's head suddenly shattered. The moment Chana Kong noticed this, she immediately shouted to be careful. At the same time, the freed knackle's accumulated anger completely erupted. It smashed its fists heavily into the ground, launching an attack with the blasted debris. Seeing this, Chana Kong wanted to step forward and stop it, but was held back by Yang Eun-yu's hand. Yang Eun-yu stated this was a training exercise arranged for the newcomers and told her not to interfere. Chana Kong sharply retorted that this was far too overwhelming for the newcomers, but Yang Eun, she felt there was no time to let our group of newcomers practice slowly, and if we couldn't even handle a knackle of this level. We would just end up dead once we left this site anyway. At this moment, the knackle's nostrils seemed to sniff something out, and it suddenly spun its body around, locking its eyes directly on me within the crowd. I was totally confused. Why was this knackle staring right at me? But in the very next second, the knackle raised its hand, preparing to attack. The blade hidden within its flesh shot out suddenly, accurately locking onto me in the crowd and directly piercing through my left arm. The intense pain made me clutch my wound, letting out a shriek like a slaughtered pig. In the next second, the knackle leaped over the crowd. It arrived directly in front of me, looming over me like a predator. Yet, just as it reached out to make its next move, two centipedes burst from the ground and entangled its entire body. It turned out Anicalist, using its centipede knackle powers, had taken this opportunity to attack. Just then, another Anicalist with tiger claws followed closely behind. Taking advantage of the knackle being entangled, she delivered a claw strike directly to its head. Half of the knackle's head was instantly sliced off. The two Anicalists who initiated the attack revealed smiles, thinking they had killed the knackle. But the next second, the knackle's half-exposed fleshy head began frantically inhaling the yellow dust, and the open wound began bubbling with a reaction. Subsequently, the entire head was restored to its original state. The two Anicalists were instantly shocked. They never expected the healing power to be so absurdly strong. While the two were distracted, the knackle ripped off the centipede wrapped around it. Because the centipede were connected to the male Anicalist's arms, the knackle swung the centipedes around, using him as a weapon to smash into the female Anicalist. Following that, the knackle pulled him close to its side, grabbing the man by the neck and lifting him up in the air. It forced its mouth open, preparing to devour the man. But just at that moment, accompanied by the crisp sound of a finger snapping, the knackle's jaw was suddenly twisted and broken. Stung by the pain, it could only release the man it was about to bite into. Eden Sinwoo, the only level 7 Anicalist among the newcomers, using his effigy knackle powers, finally couldn't help but make his move. Facing the flesh-embedded blade of the knackle, he paid it no mind whatsoever. He merely took off his glove slowly and gave his palm a forceful twist. The head of the knackle in front of him was forcibly twisted. The twisting force was so strong that it sent the decapitated head flying away. It turns out that Eden Sinwoo knew that if the knackle heads were cut off, then they could no longer produce the yellow dust, allowing them to be killed. However, Eden Sinwoo still felt it was a bit boring. He had wanted to test out more moves, but unfortunately, this knackle's physique was just too fragile. Standing behind him, Chana-kan seemed to have guessed something after seeing his ability. She questioned Eden Sinwoo, asking if he was the one who broke her blade and let the knackle go on a rampage. Eden Sinwoo simply told her not to randomly falsely accuse people without evidence, but Chana-kan didn't care about all that. She told him to snap his finger again to see if her blade would shatter. Seeing the two arguing endlessly, Vice Director Yang Eun-yu took the lead in applauding. She praised the performance of the newcomers this time, but as she was praising them, her face suddenly fell. This was because she realized that I had disappeared from the crowd. Yang Eun-yu sighed and shook her head, saying that for me to flee in terror from a knackle, it meant I was unqualified to be a knackleist. However, Chana-kan beside her felt something was wrong. She was confused at the situation earlier. It was clear that the knackle had particularly targeted me. Just then, she spoke up once again. The knackle had already been killed, yet the yellow dust here not only hadn't disappeared, but had become even denser. With her pointing this out, the crowd finally came to their senses. At that same moment, I was running frantically through the forest, asking me to join the special civil service to eradicate monsters or whatever. I simply couldn't do it. Right now, I just wanted to focus solely on escaping this dangerous place. But as I was running away, I was frozen in place by the sight before me, because a massive door appeared in front of me, and yellow dust kept continuously pouring out from within it. Just as I was wondering why there would be this door in the mountains, a gigantic knackle emerged from the large gate, hiding in the bushes nearby. I covered my mouth tightly, not daring to make a sound. I was truly the unluckiest person ever. Having finally managed to escape, I ran into a knackle again. I peeked out to check, but couldn't see the knackle's figure. Yet, unbeknownst to me was that it had crouched down right behind me. Meanwhile, bad news also reached Vice Director Yang Eun-yu's side, stating that not only had the alarm not been cleared, but it had escalated to a level 3 knackle alarm. Vice Director Yang Eun-yu had never heard of knackles appearing consecutively in the same location. Meanwhile, Chana-kan was anxious to know exactly which direction the knackle had appeared in. At the same time, being chased by that knackle, I was forced to parkour through the mountains. Under the threat of death, adrenaline filled my body, compelling me to run forward non-stop. I ran wildly with tears streaming down, screaming loudly for someone to come save me. Just then, my foot hit a rock, and my entire body tumbled down with it. It was precisely this fall that allowed me to spot a place to hide. After getting up, I ran quickly towards that house, going inside a storage house within the lot. Hiding inside and panting heavily, I peeked through the crack in the door to see if the knackle had chased me there. Indeed, that knackle had tracked me all the way here. Judging from the bone spikes hovering above its head, this knackle's ability likely involved firing those suspended bone spikes as a means of attack. But before I could ponder for even a moment, an old grandmother pushed open the gate and walked into the yard. Even though the over 3-foot-tall knackle was right in front of her, she couldn't see it at all. She only wondered why yellow fog was rising in broad daylight, blurring her vision even more. Hiding in the room room, I witnessed everything. The grandmother was in danger, and I had to help her. But as a nacalist, I had no idea what ability I had actually awakened. But I suddenly remembered Vice Director Yan Wunyu's words, that we who gained nacal abilities also possessed healing powers within the yellow dust. However, we would still die if we sustained fatal injuries. Was it really worth sacrificing myself for a complete stranger? Just then, the grandmother in the yard seemed to sense something standing in front of her. Is that you, Miss Kim? And that bone spike knackle actually mimicked the words, Miss Kim? Miss Kim? Hearing someone mocking her speech, the grandmother grew very angry. She stepped forward, wanting to clearly see who the other person was. Finally, she could see the gigantic knackle was slowly walking towards her, scaring the grandmother so much that she collapsed directly onto the ground. The bone spike knackle continued to mimic the words, Miss Kim. Following that, it aimed the hovering bone spikes on its head at the old grandmother. With a flick of its finger, the bone spike shot out explosively in an instant. After a torrential storm of blood, she discovered that I had actually taken the full brunt of the attack for her. Enduring the excruciating pain, I asked the old grandmother if she was hurt, but in the very next second, my whole body collapsed onto the grandmother. Even my entire left arm had been completely severed. Why did I have to get a level 1 Knuckles ability? This ability was just as useless as my resume. At this moment, the grandmother's anxious face was growing increasingly blurry. My heart fell into a deathly silence. I failed to save the grandmother and was going to lose my own life too. But right at this moment, yellow dust began to surge into the stump of my severed arm. As the yellow dust spread throughout my entire body, my internal knuckle ability was thoroughly activated. Sharp fangs sprouted among my originally neat teeth. In an instant, I lunged forward to bite and tear at the knuckle. At the same time, Chana Kong, who was deep in the forest trying to locate the knuckle, also heard the commotion here and rushed over immediately. But the scene before her eyes made her eyes widen in shock. She saw me tearing open the opponent's neck with my teeth. She was completely shocked at my combat style. But just then, the knuckle's counterattack came even more fiercely. It lifted my body while violently exerting force to throw me, directly smashing me fiercely into a concrete wall. Although this blow completely stripped me of my mobility, I subconsciously chewed and swallowed the chunk of flesh I had bitten off the knuckle. This sight shocked even the knuckle, which had eaten countless people. The knuckle realized something was wrong, and its body began to sway. It discovered that the wound I had just bitten had not healed at all. Chana Khan had too many questions in her head right now. Instead, she launched into an explosive sprint towards the knuckle. She needed to act now. As her body vaulted over the top of the knuckle's head, Chana Khan grabbed one of the hovering bone spikes with her bare hand. The moment her palm touched the bone spike, her skin was sliced open by its sharp blade-like edge, exposing the yellow dust to her blood. She activated her iron knuckle powers. Seeing this, the knuckle let out a beastly roar. It immediately unleashed a full power strike, firing all of its bone spikes explosively toward Chana Kong. But Chana Kong simply swung her blade backhand, reflecting all the attacking bone spikes right back. Taking advantage of this moment, she leaped into the air with her sharp blade. A cold gleam of a sword slash pierced downwards, slicing the knuckle cleanly in half. Blood splattered onto her face, and her eyes were chillingly cold. After the knuckle died, the surrounding yellow dust also dissipated. Chana Kong immediately helped up the grandmother, who had fainted from fright. After the grandmother woke up, she asked what had happened as if she had amnesia. Chana Kong replied that a wild boar had simply appeared and had been chased away. The old grandmother believed this lie. This is because once the yellow dust disappears, the memories of ordinary people regarding Knuckles also vanish. Chana Kong promised the grandmother that the civil service would handle the subsequent matters, and urged her to quickly go back to rest. After seeing the old grandmother close her door, she turned around, her gaze instantly turning cold. She wondered just who this newcomer guy was. She had never seen such astonishing regenerative power. A severed arm had grown back in such a short amount of time. She began to doubt if I really was a level 1 Knucklist. At this moment, after everything was settled, I groaned in frustration. I received a message telling me to report to the Ministry of Environment for work tomorrow. But whenever I thought of the brutal scene with the knuckle, it just made me feel like not wanting to go. Lying in bed, I thought to myself that I didn't need a job this desperately. With that, I pulled up my blanket and went fast asleep. It didn't take long for me to fall into a deep slumber and enter a dream. In the dream, I arrived at a place crowded with Knuckles. The sounds of slaughter, shouting, and roaring rose and fell incessantly. Just then, repeated calls for me to come back pulled me back to reality. I woke up covered in sweat. This wasn't my first time having this kind of dream. Ever since participating in the orientation, I had consistently dreamed of that exact scenario. Seeing the bright light shining through the window, I thought I had slept straight through to the morning. But when I opened the window and stuck my head out to check, I realized that Chongai Mountain had actually caught on fire, and inside the mountain, a magma knuckle had appeared. At the same time, a water knucklist leaped into the air and conjured a heavy downpour. The seemingly harmless water drops caused the magma knuckle to suffer repeated pain. Next, another ice knucklist unleashed his own power in combination with the water knucklist, causing the magma knuckle to freeze in place. Working in tandem, they managed to completely encase the magma knuckle in ice within just a few moments. The female knucklist asked the team leader in some confusion because knuckles are not supposed to appear at night, but the team leader told told her to go and concentrate on extinguishing the forest fire first, while he stayed behind to deal with the magma knackle. After speaking, he condensed a frost scythe. The moment he gripped the scythe, an aura of piercing cold rippled outward. The team leader initiated an explosive dash, charging toward the frozen knackle. Right at that moment, a surge of black energy penetrated through the ice and landed on the top of the knackle's head. A pair of green eyes issued an undeniable command within its mind: bring him here. In that exact instant, the magma knackle directly blasted open the ice, sealing its body. Facing the human suspended in midair preparing to attack, its readied fist cracked ominously. With a single punch thrown, the surrounding air seemed to detonate, blasting the ice knacklist away, barely stopping only after crashing into a tree. This full-power strike not only carried terrifying force but also possessed a scorching, burning heat. The water knacklist called out to the team leader in worry, but the power that black energy brought to the magma knackle was far more than just that. It even caused an eruption of massive waves of magma. The two knacklists clearly felt that the knackle before them was growing stronger and stronger. At the same time, in the S-City headquarters, all the equipment and machines blared with red alarms. It turns out that the Knackles had simultaneously attacked 20 mountains nationwide. The patterns of their appearances had completely changed, and all of this started during the orientation a week ago. But before Vice Director Yang Yu could think much about it, her subordinate reported receiving an emergency contact from the Beast City Response Center. She quickly switched channels and answered the call. On the other end of the line, the Beast City headquarters director, Myung-sik Bae, informed her of a very dire piece of news. The gate that appeared near Jumjong Mountain in Beast City hadn't closed for 3 days. No matter how many they killed, those Knackles kept pouring out of the gate endlessly. Moreover, the team members at Jumjong Mountain were completely exhausted. Vice Director Yang Yu asked him if he knew why the gate hadn't disappeared yet. Judging from the scene, the Knackles indeed kept muttering something. According to Beast City's Knackle translation knacklist, they were repeatedly saying, bring him here. Yang Yu immediately asked loudly, bring who here? But Myung-sik Bae stated he didn't know. He just felt that bringing that specific person would solve it. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Vice Director Yang Yu hurriedly dialed another phone call. A cell phone ringtone sounded inside a helicopter, and a blue-haired man answered the phone. On the other end, Yang Yu told him the situation at Jumjong Mountain in B City was quite bad and hoped he could rush there to provide support as soon as possible. But the blue-haired man simply said he had already arrived and hung up the phone. Subsequently, he leaped down from the helicopter, immediately resembling a blue shooting star illuminating the sky. Upon making contact with the yellow dust layer, he opened his mouth and swallowed massive amounts of yellow dust. As the veins near his eyes bulged, his ability was also activated. Space folding knackle powers. Space around him inverted, causing him to fall right side up, allowing him to safely landing on top of that massive gate. Below the gate, a female knacklist noticed his arrival. She wondered why a person had suddenly appeared on top of the gate, and warned the blue-haired man that it was very dangerous up there, telling him to quickly come down. However, at that moment, the knackle fighting on the scene noticed the opening the female knacklist exposed. In an instant, it leaped towards the female knacklist. Fortunately, the female knacklist was able to dodge the attack. Yet, when the female knacklist looked back, she revealed a look of despair because she couldn't dodge the knackle's next strike. But just at that moment, the blue-haired man actually tore open a spatial rift with his bare hands. As he continuously exerted force, the rift was torn wider and wider, and the spatial rift appeared right behind the knackle's head. Next, the blue-haired man reached his hand into the rift, grabbed the knackle's head, and pulled with all his might from inside the rift, yanking the knackle's head along with its spine completely out. Losing its head and spine, the knackle spouted out a fountain of blood as it collapsed. This left all the personnel at Jumjong Mountain with their mouths wide open, displaying expressions of utter shock. The blue-haired man jumped down from the gate, telling everyone they did a good job, and told them to go rest first while he would take care of all of this from now. Hearing their idol's praise, the Jumjong Mountain team leader wept bitterly. You newcomers don't even know yet? He is the first knacklist who founded the special Yellow Dust Response Team, and also the current strongest knacklist, Director Il-dejong. Just then, Il-dejong then placed his hands on the ground. Instantly, 10 spatial rifts extended and shot out from each of his fingertips. These rifts climbed up the mountain peaks along the ground, finally surging out of the peaks and shooting into the sky. Facing these 10 spatial rifts, Il-dejong began to open one of them, and the destination of this rift, it was exactly Chongai Mountain in S-City. At this moment, facing the magma knackle strengthened by the green eyes, the Chongai Mountain team leader's attacks appeared entirely ineffective. Not only was his female teammate beaten unconscious, but even he himself was at the end of his rope. He loudly called out to the unconscious water knacklist to wake up quickly so they could escape, but the knackle didn't give them a chance at all, raising its berserk fist and blasting it toward him. Seeing this, the Chongai Mountain team leader pushed his ability to conjure an ice wall, but it was smashed to pieces by the knackle's punch in an instant, sending him flying across the ground. The knackle's fist followed right on its heels. The team leader hastily shielded his team member beneath him. Just at that moment, a spatial rift suddenly appeared behind the magma knackle, pulling it towards the rift. Currently, Il-dejong, on the other side, grabbed the head of the magma knackle, pulling the knackle completely over from the other side of the rift. After Afterwards, he casually tossed it away. This casual throw exploded with force, causing great damage to the knackle. Next, he spread his palm, reached forward, time to clear out the other locations. With a swipe of his arm, a massive spatial power drove the 10 rifts. Il-de-jong unleashed his ability, complete transference. In an instant, the Nakles attacking the 20 mountains nationwide. All of them were forcibly teleported. The staff at the S-City headquarters reported to Yang Unyu that, except for B-City, the yellow dust in all other regions had suddenly disappeared. Hearing this, Yang Unyu understood that it meant that Director Il-de-jong had arrived. Il-de-jong glanced at the Nakles that had been teleported to the scene. Upon confirming that all the Nakles had been gathered, his aura suddenly shifted, and the erupting spatial power cast a thick purple glow. We can finally begin. After speaking, the Nakles present swarmed forward, moving in unison to surround him, but Il-de-jong calmly extended a single finger. Then with a swipe, the space was instantly slashed open with a black rift. His finger traced a full circle around his body, and the spatial rift he carved out acted like a circular purple radiant blade, slicing through the heads of the Nakles. The bloody scene left the team members of Jumjong Mountain utterly dumbfounded. They had lived to this day and had never seen such terrifying power. However, Il-de-jong intentionally kept that magma knackle alive. After confirming the magma knackle was still alive, he summoned the translation knacklist over to translate. He pinched the knackle's head and asked, "What is the reason for you Nakles appearing so frequently and suddenly over the past week?" The translation result provided by the translator was the same, repeating words, "Bring him here." Il-de-jong then asked who he was, but this time, the knackle obviously couldn't give a result that satisfied him. The translation knacklist shrugged and deactivated her ability, saying the opponent was either just saying "bring him here" or simply repeating their own words. Il-de-jong knew that asking further would yield no results, so the magma knackle was crushed by him casually as well, and after dealing with all the Nakles, the gate in front of them became the greatest danger. Il-de-jong, just as before, placed his palms on the ground, and purple spatial energy continuously overflowed from within his palms. This time, the rift that was torn open wasn't tiny like the last time, but was massive enough to directly envelop the entire giant gate. In the next moment, the entire gate was completely swallowed. This formidable ability made the team members couldn't help but feel fortunate. The spatial power began to dissipate, and finally, the threat was completely eliminated by Il-de-jong. After lifting the alarm, Il-de-jong returned to the S-City headquarters building. At this moment, Yang Unyu arrived in Il-de-jong's office. She wanted to know how that gate was dealt with. Il-de-jong said that he had temporarily placed it in his own dark space, and then lay his whole body back in the chair, complaining about how tired he was. But Vice Director Yang Unyu said he was just moaning about nothing again. "Don't you usually handle all these matters by yourself anyway?" After saying that, she used the remote control panel to turn on the large screen. She wondered why he suddenly wanted to see the information on these newcomers. Il-de-jong wanted to figure out exactly who the Nakles were looking for, and what their reason for looking for him was. At the same time, deep within the abyss, countless Nakles had gathered. They raised their heads, seemingly waiting for the awakening of a certain leader, and this leader was precisely the gigantic, slumbering woman in front of them. In front of the woman, these Nakles were as insignificant as ants. The woman abruptly opened her eyes, revealing a pair of green pupils, and she issued her command, "Bring him to me." Meanwhile, I, who had just claimed I wouldn't become a special recruit, nevertheless arrived at the entrance of the G Island Yellow Dust Response Center. It turns out that after my mother learned that I had become a civil servant, she felt extremely happy that I finally got a job, so I had no other choice but to continue. When I got inside, the person who welcomed me was team leader Deokman Go, but upon seeing me, he expressed his disappointment because I had ran away previously. Subsequently, he cheerfully greeted another knacklist. It was Eden Sianwoo, complaining that he should have been assigned to the S-City headquarters rather than G Island. "Yeah, a dignified level 7 knacklist being assigned here. I guess there must be something wrong with you as a person too. In any case, welcome to the G Island team." At this moment, I began to feel my panic disorder once again. I didn't know what would greet me behind these doors. I even imagined that it would be a horrible sight in front of me. Just then, team leader Deokman Go snapped me back to reality. It turns out that the office environment here was no different from that of ordinary office workers. This was completely different from what I had expected. Deokman Go introduced the team members to us one by one. First, he himself, Deokman Go, was the team leader of the G Island team, already 41 years old this year. The woman with short hair drinking coffee was the 36-year-old Jaiwan Yun. There was the 51-year-old Abak Kim, and the delinquent-looking youth with dyed hair was the 25-year-old Yoseok Nam. After introducing the team members, Deokman Go waved his hand and told us to familiarize ourselves with the operations on our own. But this was the first job of my life, and also the only job where I had no idea what to do, so a pounding sense of nervousness inevitably rose in my heart. Looking at Eden Sianwoo, I thought to myself that since it was also his first day of work, he must be just as nervous as I was. But regardless, we were rookies who entered in the same batch, so I figured I still needed to get along well with him. But when Eden Sianwoo saw me greeting him, he just directly cursed at me. I felt instantly petrified, never expecting that kind of reaction from anyone. Moreover, he was incessantly muttering about why an elite like him would be assigned to G Island. Wondering about his words, I asked Yoseok Nam a question. What was the G Island team like? Hearing someone ask, Yoseok Nam took off his earphones. First, the Special Yellow Dust Response Team had established 13 headquarters nationwide, and under each headquarters, there were teams responsible for various mountains respectively, and Nacalists with powerful capabilities level 7 or above were mostly assigned to the headquarters to execute important missions. In places with low population density like our G Island, generally only relatively weak Nacals would appear, so the ones assigned here were also some weak Nacalists, or people with some sort of flaw. At this point, I understood why I was chosen to be in this team. However, it meant that the other people here also had flaws. Before I could think it over, Yoseok Nam continued, saying there were also people with very strong abilities who voluntarily came here. At this moment, we saw Chana Kong, with wet hair draped over her shoulders. I looked at her with recognition, and she looked at me with some disbelief as well. She sat in her chair, observing us in the distance. She didn't expect the newcomer to their team would actually be the weird me she encountered. Back when the Bone Spike Knuckle was dealt with, I woke up from a coma remembering absolutely nothing. At this time, the hazard pay Yoseok Nam mentioned made my jaw drop. In the future, we would receive a hazard pay. Didn't this mean asking us to risk our lives to fight Nacals? However, Yoseok Nam held up 5 fingers and said the hazard pay would be 5 times our salary. Hearing this, my previous fear was swept away, and I instead became extremely excited. 5 times would mean an annual salary of over 100 million. After saying that, Yoseok Nam told me not to annoy him by asking this and that anymore, and told me to just stay here on standby before the Knuckle alarm rang. I pouted, thinking to myself that I hadn't asked that many questions either. Time flew by in a flash, and in the blink of an eye, it was time to get off work. To me, it felt like this job was a complete walk in the park. Seeing the arrival of new colleagues, at Jaiwan Yun's suggestion, everyone went out to have a team dinner together. Meanwhile, in the S-City headquarters, inside the secret laboratory beneath the building, Yang Eun-yu reported to Il Dejong, stating that the patterns of the Nacal's appearances had returned to normal. Il Dejong asked her if she had found out the reason for their sudden rampage. Yang Eun-yu answered no, and asked him if it could be an omen of that impending day of reckoning. Il Dejong stared for a long time at the person with bounded limbs and feathered hair, and then said it couldn't be confirmed yet. He told Yang Eun-yu to hand down an order that regarding that day of reckoning, all team leaders must be made to keep their mouths firmly shut. Otherwise, if ordinary Nacalists within the organization learned of this matter, it could cause immense chaos. The scene shifted to the G Island team currently having their dinner. Team leader Diakman Go unhesitatingly revealed the news about that impending day of reckoning. According to a prophetic Nacalist, within a year, Nacals would fall from the sky like raindrops. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel an inevitable sense of doom. Saying this, he continued that it was top secret and telling us not to leak it, but the team members who heard the news seemed entirely indifferent to it. This made me feel extremely absurd. At this moment, a yellow flash appeared above the mountains. A gate had manifested high in the sky. Instantly, multiple Knuckle limbs charged out of this yellow gate. At the exact same time, the alarms signaling the appearance of a Knuckle rang. The originally harmonious atmosphere was instantly broken. Chana Kong immediately stood up and said she would go handle it. Eden Sinwa beside her also wanted to tag along, but was rejected by Chana Kong with a single glance. She then specifically named me to go along with her. In the car, traveling to our destination, I felt very uneasy because of that day of reckoning the team leader just mentioned. Chana Kong noticed this and told me not to care too much about that prophecy, saying the higher-ups had already prepared contingency plans, as the headquarters had many powerful Nacalists. She said we only needed to kill the Nacals that appeared on G Island. I found this statement of her somewhat scary, but at the same time, I completely admired her determination, and added that it was her first time seeing a Devour Nacalist like me, being praised for the first time in my life. I blushed a little. She categorized me as a Devour Nacalist. I wondered if that the first monster I encountered was actually a Devour Knuckle. With that thought, I asked Chana Kong what exactly the Devour ability was. She smiled faintly, saying that just as the name implied, it was the ability to eat Nacals. It didn't take long for us to locate the Knuckle. The Knuckle that appeared this time was of a very weak level. It was swiftly pinned to a tree by Chana Kong using her iron sword. Am I really supposed to eat this? She informed that whatever parts of a Knuckle I ate couldn't regenerate, so she continued to urge me to try and eat the Knuckle in front of us. Holding the Knuckle's tentacle, my stomach churned violently. I tried hard to picture it as an octopus, and attempted to eat it down, but the inner disgust was just insurmountable. Chana Kong started to get annoyed, urging me to keep trying to take a bite, despite trying very hard to comply. Facing this rotting tentacle still made me vomit incessantly. I even felt extremely sick when I went to work the next day. Even Eden Sinwo added insult to injury, saying it was truly idiotic of me to vomit every time I went to a scene, and angrily complained that because of a guy like me, he hadn't yet participated in a single field operation. Eden Sinwo didn't like that Officer Kong only took me along every time in order to train me, watching his back as he left angrily. Although I wanted to retort, thinking about it carefully, what he said also made some sense. I had to pull myself together, but when the Knuckle alarm rang again, Chana Kong immediately got up and called me to move out together, only to find the desk in front front of her completely empty. At that moment, I was hiding inside the restroom. Even though I told myself I needed to pull myself together, just the thought of having to eat a knuckle while fully conscious made my whole body feel nauseous, dizzy, and wanting to vomit. It's truly just my kind of luck to get this kind of crappy ability. I walked unsteadily out of the restroom, thinking I would let myself off the hook today and work hard tomorrow, but bumping into Officer Kong head-on gave me a fright. She asked me if I had just hid in the restroom. Clutching my stomach, I excused that after biting the knuckle yesterday, I felt like I had food poisoning and my stomach wasn't feeling well. Just as I was about to continue spinning lies, Chana Kong interrupted me, saying I probably wasn't suitable for this job. She said that some people, even after gaining knuckle abilities, don't necessarily have to become special civil servants. As long as they sign a non-disclosure agreement, they can just live under surveillance for the rest of their lives. Moreover, she said a cowardly person like me would just get killed here anyway, but more importantly, might also cause the deaths of civilians. Finally, she solemnly told me that if I wasn't up to the task of this job, I should please leave. They were already short-handed, so I shouldn't just occupy a spot without doing anything useful. The scene shifted to me arriving outside by a lake. After hearing Chana Kang's words, I planned to just resign right there and then. Rather than being killed by a knuckle, it was better to be under surveillance for a lifetime. With that said, I dialed my mother's phone number, preparing to tell her the news of my resignation, but after the call connected, my mother said she was touring Inwang Mountain with her best friend. I groaned at her, clearly having told her to never go into the mountains anymore. However, she couldn't hear me at this time, and she complained about why the mountain was suddenly filled with yellow dust. Following that, the call disconnected. I clearly heard the words yellow dust, and my hair stood on end instantly. Then I rushed toward Inwang Mountain like a madman, because with every second delayed, my mother's hope of surviving would decrease by a second. At this time at Inwang Mountain, the Inwang Mountain team had actually been entirely wiped out, and this was all done by this level 5 knuckle. Only a newly joined rookie and the late arriving team leader remained. The team leader possessed the ability of the clone knuckle. At the same time, he told the rookie to quickly go seek help from the headquarters, and immediately, the rookie ran to follow the order. Meanwhile, I took a taxi and rapidly arrived at Inwang Mountain. I looked around at the crowd of people who had been evacuated down the mountain, only to find my mother's figure was completely absent among them. So I hastily sought help from the special civil servant nearby, saying my mother was still inside and asking them to let me up the mountain, but I was rejected by the staff, who said there were wild animals roaming on the mountain and it was very dangerous. This just confirmed to me that there was indeed a knuckle present. Instead of going through the path, I decided to take an alternate route. I began climbing the mountain, hoping my mother would stay safe until I reached her. Meanwhile, deep within the yellow dust-covered mountain, my petite mother was indeed still currently on the mountain. At this moment, my mother saw a figure in the distance. It was actually me climbing to the mountain peak, finally finding my mother's figure within an area of yellow dust. She was a bit surprised as to what I was doing in this place. I pulled out my phone, claiming I found her based on her social media account. Next, she asked me why I wasn't at work. I dismissed her question, saying whether I went to work or not wasn't important right now, but my mother seemed as if she hadn't heard me, and even started showing off my status as a civil servant to her best friend next to her. But just as I told them to leave quickly because now was not the time to discuss these things, a few fallen leaves suddenly dropped on my head, making a rustling sound. Looking up, it was actually that knuckle crouching in the tree. The knuckle loomed over us like a predator in the trees. Seeing this, I was completely in shock, and my panic disorder was triggered once again. It was always like this whenever I encounter a knuckle. I began to feel dizzy and started to lose my balance. Eventually, I began to fall over. Seeing this, my mother couldn't help but exclaim loudly. This made her presence known to the knuckle. It suddenly charged down from the tree, and its target was squarely my mother. In the moment of desperation, I also charged down, wanting to block the knuckle's attack, but I tumbled consecutively on the vertical cliff face. At that moment, I clearly knew it was too late to try and stop the opponent, and just as it opened its flesh-like teeth to pounce on my mother, I screamed powerlessly, pinning my hopes on a miracle happening. However, at that exact moment, several flashes of blades suddenly flickered. Instantly, the knuckle crashed heavily onto the ground, and it turns out that the knuckle's back was abruptly pierced by several bone blades. My mother thus narrowly escaped this unexpected disaster. However, I wondered where those bone blades that just pierced the knuckle had popped out from, and my mother's actions gave me the answer. She asked what was floating around my head, and it turns out that there were bone blades floating above my head. Seeing this, I was even more confused, but at this moment, I understood that this was precisely the ability of that knuckle that nearly killed me last time. Suddenly, my back ached as if something swelled up. Following that, a bone blade emerged from beneath my skin and floated behind me in formation. I tried to command these bone blades, and found that I was indeed using and controlling that knuckle's power. I began to realize that my ability wasn't just that knuckles injured by my bite couldn't regenerate, but I could also eat and acquire the opponent's abilities. Now that I could use the ability of the bone spike knuckle from last time, maybe I had a chance to kill the knuckle in front of me. Moreover, that knuckle was lying on the ground and its strength didn't look like much either. Was this really the guy the Inwang Mountain team failed to catch? But before I could think deeply, the mirror on the knuckle's forehead suddenly flashed. Subsequently, densely packed bone blades popped out from its back, just like mine had just done. This was none other than a mirror knackle. It had the ability to copy any power. Amidst my shock, it actually launched a sudden sneak attack of bone blades. Before I could dodge, countless bone blades pierced into my entire body. Yet, compared to the pain, I wanted to know more about why that guy could use the exact same ability as me. As the knackle approached me step by step, the mirror on its head flashed again, and what was reflected inside was actually my own figure. At this moment, a hypothesis formed in my mind. I reached out my hand and made a snapping motion, and that knackle actually made the exact same motion as me. This guy's ability was indeed mimicking the abilities of the person fighting it. However, my mother was my first priority. I checked on her immediately, and apparently she was hit by the bone blades of the knackle. Still, my mother was worried about my own condition, but due to the yellow dust's healing properties, I revealed that I was alright. However, there was no doubt that it was still dangerous here, so I have to stand my ground and protect my mother here. I quickly stood in front of my mother and told them to hurry up and find a place to hide. My mother asked me what I was going to do then. I gave a knowing smile. Aren't I a civil servant? My job is to protect you. After saying that, I launched an explosive dash toward the mirror knackle that was trying to approach. I grabbed its body and continued charging until we both fell off the cliff together. Seeing this, my mother called out my name in horror. What she didn't know was that I did this in order to get the dangerous knackle far away from her. Seeing the knackle fall into the ground, I kept my goal to keep this knackle far away from my mother for as long as I can, just until the Inwang Mountain team arrives. At the same time, the rookie from the Inwang Mountain team finally waited until backup arrived. The arrivals were precisely the two brothers, Nero and Namble, who had rushed over from S City. Namble asked him why he failed to catch the knackle. That rookie replied tremblingly that the guy was terrifying, and aside from him, the entire Inwang Mountain team was wiped out. Nero asked him how a level 5 knackle could wipe out a team containing a level 7 knacklist, and what ability that knackle actually possessed. A mirror. It's a mirror. It can mimic anyone's ability. After this, Nero and Namble followed the rookie's guidance to the location where the Inwang Mountain team was wiped out, but what they saw was the mountaintop was crammed with densely packed mirror knackles, having copied and defeated the team leader's clone ability. Namble's mind was relatively simple. He still couldn't figure out why there would be so many identical knackles here, but Nero informed him that the Inwang Mountain team leader's ability was cloning, so that mirror knackle must have mimicked him. As long as the main body was eliminated, the other replicated clones would also be eliminated along with it. He wanted to find out the original to make the clones disappear, but his brother interrupted. Who cares? Just kill them all and that'll be it. He charged forward, leaping high in the sky, above the crowd of mirror knackles, and crashed down heavily with his strength. Watching his brainless brother, Nero felt a headache coming on instantly, because he realized the main body of this horde of mirror knackles wasn't among them. What he didn't know was that at this moment, the knackle's main body was currently fighting me. The mirror knackle opened its large mouth and continuously spewed out yellow dust. Seeing its terrifying regenerative ability, I thought to myself that I couldn't let it continue to heal in peace. But just then, it mimicked the voice of my own mother, asking me what's wrong. Hearing this, I was completely annoyed that it would dare copy my mother. Immediately, I mobilized all my bone blades and blasted them at the knackle. Disappointingly, not a single strike hit. In contrast, the mirror knackle merely casually commanded a single bone blade, and that single shot accurately pierced through my shoulder. This huge contrast filled me with furious anger. I mobilized the bone blades once more and blasted them at the opponent. Fortunately, this time, using the advantage of numbers, one blade managed to hit, but this single blade didn't deal much damage to the mirror knackle. In fact, the wound healed in just an instant. Although it was the exact same ability, the knackle had the advantage of a better healing ability, but this exactly reminded me of what Chana Kong said to me before. At this time, Chana Kong complained that I wasn't listening to her orders, while I complained that I wasn't cut out to be in the field. She knew that I was afraid to get hurt in battle, and she reassured me of our regenerative abilities within the yellow dust. Still, I didn't like the pain of getting hurt, and that my Devour ability would upset my stomach. Hearing my constant complaints, Chana Kong became increasingly furious. I wondered if there was any other way to fight, but she just reiterated that cutting off the neck was the best way to stop the yellow dust production. However, my Devour ability was not as deadly to do this kind of thing, saying that I am better in a support position. But her next words stuck to me, telling me that no one heals as fast as I did in the yellow dust, so I shouldn't be afraid to fight the knackle. As long as I didn't fear fighting the knackle, I still had a chance. Furthermore, my Devour ability was still an available option. I understood that my accuracy wasn't good enough to hit the neck precisely. However, there was still another way. I gripped one of the bone blades forcefully with my left hand, and with a wave of my right hand, I fired the rest of the bone blades explosively toward the knackle. As expected, not a single blade hit the mark. At this time, my figure was reflected on the knackle's mirror once again. Gripping the final bone blade with both hands, I leaped down and lunged fiercely at the knackle's head. But just as I was about to land the fatal hit, the mirror knackle forcefully blocked it by catching the blade with its teeth. At the same time, it grabbed my neck with one hand, lifting me in the air, and then abruptly launched itself upwards, reaching even higher above the cliff, and using me as a meat shield to smash fiercely into the ground. The powerful impact, combined with the the vicious force of its arm made me feel completely unable to breathe for a moment. I bit my lip, wanting to use my Devour ability, but right now I couldn't move at all, let alone use my Devour ability to bite it. But just then, the mirror on the Knackle's head flashed again, and it actually took the initiative to take a bite at my neck first. The intense pain made me unable to help but wail loudly. However, I also took this opportunity to draw the bone blade from my back and stabbed it directly into the Knackle's neck. After getting up, I couldn't understand why it would suddenly bite me when it clearly could have just crushed my neck to kill me just a moment ago. But before I could think much, I felt the world spinning around me. The wound where the Knackle had just bitten me hadn't healed and was still bleeding profusely. I didn't expect it could even mimic my Devour ability. Looking at the blood gushing out, I wondered how long a person could hold on while bleeding non-stop. I remembered my training with Chana-Kong once again. She reminded me to fight through the panic attacks to stop going unconscious, and ultimately, if I failed, the civilians will be the ones to die. At this time, my mother was still trying to call out to me. While beneath the cliffside, I tried to keep pressure on the wound. I tightened my grip on the bone blade in my hand, and the mirror Knackle did the exact same thing. The words of Chana-Kong echoed in my head: if you're going to die, take the Knackle with you. Although my body was swaying and I couldn't stand firmly, I activated my Devour ability once again, and I resolutely charged at the Knackle. And the mirror Knackle truly lived up to being an excellent mimic. Its movements were almost indistinguishable from mine. The bone blade gripped by the mirror Knackle pierced into my kidney. Meanwhile, I threw the bone blade I was holding high into the air and made it pause suspended in the sky. I wrapped my arms around the Knackle's entire waist and hugged it tightly, then fully mobilized the bone spike Knackle's ability. The scattered bone blades stuck in the trees, the others stuck in the ground. They all shook and flew outwards. All the bone blades that have been produced blasted toward both of us. The countless bone blades pierced through the flesh of the Knackle. It screamed out in pain, and even though my body was also shot to pieces, I still did not let go, because the fatal strike had yet to fall. That was until the bone blade thrown high into the air finally displayed its divine might, directly severing the Knackle's head with a single strike. Only then did I let go of the opponent's body. I slumped onto the ground, panting heavily. I survived this battle, and this was also my true first blood, the first time I killed a Knackle in the truest sense. With my killing of the mirror Knackle, the clones it had replicated also began to dissipate simultaneously. Namble wondered if the clones disappearing meant they had already killed the main body. My foolish brother. The main body was killed by someone else. But who could that person be? And after killing the mirror Knackle, the Devour effect applied to my neck also became invalid, and the wound completely healed. But just as I moved my feet preparing to go look for my mother, suddenly the words, "Eat it," echoed in my ears, freezing me in place. A memory I didn't possess appeared in my mind. In the memory, my father pointed forward, his mouth constantly saying, "Eat it." I didn't understand why only now was I remembering this kind of memory, and what exactly was he telling me to eat. However, this memory brought my attention to the Knackle on the ground. By eating its flesh, I could acquire its ability through Devour. I was reminded of team leader Diakmango's words, so I decided that if that day of reckoning comes, I have to be stronger in order to protect my mother, and I had to do it in the way that I know that I can. With this thought, I crouched on the ground and swallowed chunks of the Knackle's flesh one by one. From now on, if I encountered powerful Knackles, I also had to eat them. After finding my mother, I immediately took her to the hospital. Just like the old grandmother before, my mother completely couldn't remember the memories from within the yellow dust. This is also a major characteristic of ordinary people after the yellow dust disappears. To make it more convincing, I even took out my phone to show her the news fabricated by the government, telling her not to go into the mountains anymore. But my mother's expression turned very disappointed. She said someone saw a person who looked very much like my dad at Inwang Mountain, which was why she went up the mountain. Indeed, thinking about it this way, my dad also went missing on a mountain. Could he have encountered an Knackle? Right at this moment, a segment of lost memory inserted itself into my mind again. I saw my childhood self staring blankly above a tree, as if observing something. Suddenly, a drop of fresh blood hit my face. My eyes instantly filled with terror. Up in that tree was a wolf-like monster covered in mouths all over its body, currently holding an unrecognizable man in its mouth. My heart pounded rapidly. The sudden appearance of this memory was exactly the same as the last time in the mountains. But before I could think more about it, my mother interrupted me. She asked why my complexion was so poor, and whether work was too tiring. I hastily answered, telling her not to worry and that I had already adapted. Moreover, after experiencing this incident, I also decided to continue staying on as a special recruit. But the first thing that happened when I returned to the G Island team's office location was receiving a scolding from Officer Jaiwan Yun. She asked where I had run off to without a word yesterday. Eden Sienwu, mocking as always, said I definitely ran away out of fear. To this, I could only continuously apologize on the side. But to my surprise, Chana-Kong said she saw I wasn't feeling well yesterday and let me go home first, and that it was her fault for forgetting to report it up the chain. Jaiwan Yun brushed back her hair and questioned if she was joking. How could she forget something like this? Is it because your previous outstanding performance led us to spoil you too much? Chana-Kong replied that she didn't remember being favored either. Right at this moment, the Knackle alarm rang out once again. Chana-Kong immediately put on her work uniform, saying she would go resolve this level 2 Knackle first and listened to her nagging after coming back. At this moment, I also stood up and said I would go too. This sudden contrasting behavior left the entire G Island team collectively dumbfounded. And so, Chana-kan took me and Yoziak and rushed to the mountaintop. On the way, I thanked Chana-kan for taking a scolding from me. Chana-kan knew that I left because of the things she had said, but she asked what made me come back. Hearing this, I said very seriously that I had already prepared myself to fight Knuckles. Right at this moment, a burst of yellow dust spread. The level 2 Knuckle had appeared. Although a level 2 Knuckle is very weak, Chana-kan still cautioned us to be careful and not to underestimate it just because of its level. The Inlang Mountain team had been wiped out by a mere level 5 Knuckle. After all, Yoziak added that luckily people from the S-City headquarters came over and dealt with it. Otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable. He said they truly lived up to being a monster group comprised of level 7 and above Knuckleists, and were really amazing. Hearing this, I looked completely bewildered. Obviously that Knuckle was killed by me. How did the credit go to them? Although I really wanted to speak up and get their recognition, because of the matter of leaving early, I still didn't dare to say it out loud. However, the behavior of the level 2 Knuckle in front of us was very bizarre. It kept incessantly rubbing its armpits. Seeing this, I stepped in front of Chana-kan and Yoziak. You two please step back and let me handle it. Both Chana-kan and Yoziak looked at me with some disbelief. Yoziak even said that I was just a level 1 Knuckleist. Could I really beat a level 2 Knuckle? Hearing this, I pointed to myself. Just leave it to me. After saying that, I faced off against the Knuckle. I brushed my hair aside, and a mirror suddenly appeared on my forehead. As the mirror flashed, I activated the Mirror Knuckles ability. Because the Mirror Knuckles ability is to copy the opponent's ability, I forcefully thrust my open hands into my armpits and, just like the Knuckle in front of me, frantically started rubbing my armpits. Waves of stench continuously emanated from my underarms. That level 2 Knuckle sniffed with its nostrils and frowned slightly. Realizing the stench came from me, it began to swing its arms frantically, driving a continuous wave of stench blasting toward me. This stench attack was truly extraordinary, burning the eyes and stinging the nose, but I absolutely couldn't admit defeat either. I moved around while swinging my arms, initiating a stench duel. Yoziak covered his mouth and nose tightly, attempting to completely isolate himself from this patch of air. He realized this Knuckle's smelly armpits were like a chemical weapon, and the condition of Chana-kan beside him was even more severe, her swaying body threatening to collapse at any moment. Seeing this, he supported Chana-kan, complaining about how she, as a level 7 Knuckleist, could fail just because of a little smell. During the battle, I looked back and realized the current situation. If this continued, all three of us might meet our end here, so I had to end this battle as soon as possible. Realizing this, I launched an even fiercer stench bombardment. At this moment, this was no longer a simple battle, but a bombardment of stink. Charging up all the stench I could, I thrusted my hands forward to unleash everything I had, and the level 2 Knuckle could not handle my capabilities. Falling before my superior technique, I stood in place breathing in large mouthfuls of fresh air, then turned my head to announce to them that I won this battle, but they couldn't feel happy at all. Instead, they all wore expressions as if life was no longer worth living. After dealing with the axillary odor Knuckle, the three of us went to the riverside to wash up and clear away the stench. Chana-kan curiously asked me if, by using the Devour ability to eat a Knuckle, I could absorb its ability. I confirmed this and told her the last Knuckle I ate possessed mimicking abilities, so I could use the same ability as the level 2 Knuckle. But Yoziak beside us suddenly burst into uproarious laughter, saying my posture was so grand just to perform such a weird ability. Hearing this, I felt somewhat ashamed and my face flushed red. Chana-kan put her hand on my shoulder and said I did very well, and had really grown a lot compared to before. Hearing this, I became even more red, but she continued to comment that it was gross for me to eat Knuckle, and her choice of words completely shocked me. Next, she told me to rest for now, while she and Yoziak went to check if the alarm on the yellow dust measuring device had cleared. Watching them leave, I sat on the ground looking annoyed. It was clearly a chance to make them view me in a new light, but I just had to run into such a weird Knuckle. Now look, instead of acting cool, I ended up losing face completely. Just as I was feeling depressed, a dark shadow blocked the sunlight and enveloped my entire body. I turned my head to check, thinking Yoziak and the others had returned, but didn't expect the arrival was actually the current strongest Knuckleist. It was Director Ilda Jong. He asked me if the level 5 Knuckle at Inwang Mountain was killed by me, even though I was merely a level 1 Knuckleist. Hearing this, I nodded and asked how he knew, but he directly reached out his hand, asking me if I would like to join the S-City headquarters team. Hearing this, I was speechless on the spot. He asked if I had heard of the S-City team. Overwhelmed by the unexpected favor, I took a step back, saying I heard it was a place where the most outstanding Knuckleists gathered, but why seek out a level 1 Knuckleist like me to join? Ilda Jong smiled wickedly, saying he could see a person's potential. After this interaction, Ilda Jong returned to the headquarters. Behind him, Yang Eun-yu followed hurriedly, asking him where he went at the expense of delaying the meeting time. Ilda Jong replied that there was a guy he was very interested in. Yang Eun-yu asked with slight confusion if it was his son, whom she remembered was named Eden Sianwoo, but Ilda Jong said it wasn't him, since he divorced Eden Sianwoo's mother. The two of them hadn't seen each other again. The one he was interested in wasn't his son, but me. This this newcomer. Yang Yu followed up by asking if he still believed the recent anomalies in the Nakel's appearances were related to a certain newcomer. Hearing this, Ildajong very firmly told her that his intuition exactly told him so. At the same time, I had returned to the G Island Response Center. I was completely overjoyed. Not only was I recognized by the most powerful person, but I also had the opportunity to go report to the S-City headquarters at any time. But just as I was feeling happy, I was once again stared at by Eden Sianwoo's gloomy eyes. He asked why I was grinning all day, saying it was incredibly annoying. Hearing this, I retaliated in return, mentioning that he's just mad that he wasn't good enough for S-City. So I asked which one of us was the nobody. Hearing this, Eden Sianwoo was extremely furious and stood up. He called me a smelly, armpit-flapping piece of trash, which struck directly to my heart. My face instantly turned crimson as I asked him how he knew. However, the main culprit was indeed Yoziak. Right now, he was even demonstrating the scene of my battle with the level 2 knackle to the team leader and the others. This provoked laughter mocking me throughout the entire office. Just at this moment, Officer Yun appeared beside me and loudly stopped them, telling them not to laugh at me anymore, and saying I did a great job this time. She said that before, I could only hide in the restroom, but now I could solo a knackle. What great progress this was. Hearing this, I looked utterly depressed, because this was even more embarrassing than what the others had said. Moreover, seeing Chana Kang's uncaring look, I actually felt that this was also a kind of silent mockery. I had already been branded as an incompetent person here. Director Ilda Jong told me to call him once I made up my mind. The idea of starting fresh in S-City headquarters didn't sound too bad to me right now. But right at that time, the level 2 knackle alarm went off, and Chana Kang was about to volunteer once again. Just then, Eden Sianwoo grabbed her arm and told her very seriously that she must let him go this time, as he was about to die of boredom staying here, and even held his head high, telling me to go along with him, saying he was going to show me the world and let me see how a level 7 knacklist deals with knackles. Hearing this, I was completely reluctant. At this moment, in the mountains where the alert originated, Eden Sianwoo and I were already hiking up the mountain. Although I didn't want to spend another second with this psycho, since it was a mission, I could only act together with him. But when we got to the scene, the situation had already turned bad, because this time, the yellow dust was spreading out from inside a house, which meant the knackle was hiding inside. And when we pushed the door open and entered, we found that the concentration of the yellow dust inside was actually even thicker than outside. This was definitely not a mere level 2 alarm. It was very likely level 4 or higher. Unlike Eden Sianwoo's fearlessness, I acted carefully at every turn, because there were too many empty rooms here, and there was no telling where a knackle might pop out to attack, until we walked up to a door that was leaking yellow dust outwards. Eden Sianwoo said that the knackle should be inside this room. After saying that, he turned the doorknob but found it couldn't be opened at all. He guessed it was probably locked from the inside. At this moment, I blocked his way, saying we should wait before opening it, as we still didn't know what level of knackle would come out from inside. But Eden Sianwoo pushed me aside, saying that he would just smash it entirely to pieces. After saying that, he snapped his fingers to activate his ability. In that instant, I thought the door would directly shatter, and I even specially made a defensive posture. However, that room door remained completely intact, without even the slightest movement. Eden Sianwoo's face was full of confusion, feeling this shouldn't be the case, so he looked inside through the keyhole, and found there was indeed a knackle inside. Moreover, he didn't know why, but in the clearly empty room, the knackle was curled up as if in fear, its whole body cowering in the corner. Seeing that he could observe the inside from the keyhole, I also leaned over and took a look. I was a little puzzled as to why this knackle would lock itself in the room, guessing it probably wasn't very strong. However, Eden Sianwoo cursed me for being an idiot, saying the yellow dust inside was at level 7 or above, making it a very dangerous guy. Hearing this, my heart skipped a beat. Wasn't it said that in remote places like G Island, only relatively weak knackles would appear? Why was a knackle level 7 or above also heading here? But Eden Sianwoo said this was the first time since coming here that he felt a surge of excitement, because he finally got to fight a tough opponent. Looking at his deranged expression, I knew this guy had gone crazy. We had to get out first and notify the headquarters, so I turned the doorknob, preparing to open the door and get out, only to find that the exit door couldn't be open either. I tried using my body to crash the door open, but it still didn't work. Just like the door the knackle was hiding behind, neither could be opened. Just as I was wondering if this was the ability of the knackle in the room, Eden Sianwoo started frantically attacking the room door, while shouting for that hermit knackle to come out and fight him. But even after he snapped 10 fingers and activated his ability 10 times, that door didn't show even a single crack. I also tried to smash open escape routes other than the main door, but whether it was doors, windows, or walls, they all became incredibly hard and simply couldn't be smashed. This made me even more certain that trapping us in the house was the ability of this hermit knackle. We couldn't attack, nor could we break out defensively. Right now, I could only pin my hopes on the other members of the G Island team coming to rescue us. At the same time, inside the G Island Response Center, team leader Diakman Go suddenly slammed his desk, saying something terrible had happened. But the terrible thing he referred to wasn't that Eden Sianwoo and I hadn't returned, but rather that he had forgotten about going to B City to attend collective training. Instantly, the various team members scrambled to compile documents, gathered them them onto a USB drive and tossed it to Diakman Go, telling him to quickly head to B City for the training. After finishing everything, the team members thought they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. But at this moment, Yoziak suddenly realized that Eden Sianwoo and I had been out for 3 hours and still hadn't returned, which gave Jaiwan Yun quite a headache, muttering that she shouldn't have let the two newcomers go alone together. And after saying that, she told Yoziak to go check with her, while Abakim and Chana Kong were to stay behind on standby. But Chana Kong felt this incident wasn't quite right, got up, put on her coat, and insisted on going along as well. Seeing this, Jaiwan Yun got close to her ear. This scene is near that certain place. Are you really okay with this? Don't worry, it's fine. Let's head out quickly. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the scene. Just as they were wondering where the two of us were, Yoziak saw two blurry figures approaching from deep within the hallway. At that moment, Eden Sianwoo and I were running frantically toward them, shouting loudly for them absolutely not to close the door. But we were still a step too late, and the main door had already closed. Seeing this, both Eden Sianwoo and I felt a bit emotionally crushed inside. Looking at us being depressed, Jaiwan Yun asked what exactly had happened. Following that, I told them everything, one by one. Now they also were made aware of the hermit knackle inside the room. After listening, Chana Kong told us to step back, as she still wanted to give it a try. After speaking, her arm began to condense into iron, and instantly, an iron sword was fully formed. Chana Kong struck the door with all her might, but the room door remained completely intact. Next, Jaiwan Yun rolled up her sleeves, wanting to try as well, revealing a black spot in her arm. It began to animate, revealing a tiny black spider. This was her ability, the spider knackle powers, and her idea was to utilize the spider's small size to drill into the room through the keyhole. The spider tried with all its might, but indeed, the hole was still too small, and the spider simply couldn't get in. Seeing that everyone had shown off their abilities, Eden Sianwoo told Yoziak not to just stand there watching, and to let us see if his ability could be of any use. But Yoziak stated that his ability was not an attack type power. I commented that he was actually useless on sight, but he retorted that I should just use my newly acquired mirror power. However, this was impossible, because it was too far and difficult to see for the mirror knackle power to activate. Hearing this, Yoziak also called me useless in this situation. If this was the case, Eden Sianwoo wondered who else could save them that was left in the office. Right now, the team leader had gone to attend the collective training and wouldn't be back until tomorrow, so the only one who could come rescue us now was Officer Abakim. But just at this moment, the sudden appearance of a human figure gave us a fright. Officer Abakim was actually already here. He said he saw we hadn't come back for a long time, so he came over to take a look. Every single one of us was surprised that his presence was so small that no one noticed his arrival. Next, we reorganized the entire situation and explained it to Abakim once more. What do you think, Officer Abakim? Can you do something about it? Hearing this, Officer Abakim just lay down directly on the ground. This bizarre behavior hard stunned us for a few seconds. I asked him what kind of move this was, as it seemed he just lay on the ground and fell asleep. Jaiwan Yun shrugged, saying she didn't know either, having never seen Officer Abakim's power. Just as everyone was at a loss for what to do, Yoziak pinpointed the crux of the problem with a single sentence. He asked, "Didn't we feel it was strange? That knackle refused to come out, so how did it plan to kill us?" And right at this moment, the entire house suddenly experienced a violent tremor. Chana Kong quickly rushed out, saying the sound came from inside the room. When everyone arrived, the scene before us left us utterly shocked. We saw the inner room was violently shrinking. Eden Sianwoo shouted that he now understood the hermit knackle's goal. It intended to make the entire house, aside from the space it was currently in, fold into itself, thereby killing us. And at this moment, the hermit knackle inside the room actually began to duplicate itself. For years ago, this house didn't look as abandoned as it did now. Back then, a younger Chana Kong arrived and greeted her grandmother. The grandmother welcomed her home and invited her inside. Her younger brother wished that Chana Kong could stay with them forever, reminding her to visit every vacation. Chana Kong noticed the drawing on the walls, wondering if grandmother would get mad, but her younger brother said that grandmother liked them, saying that it was a happy family portrait. And this happy family portrait was faded, but still present, in this old house, the house that was exactly folding into itself. Seeing this, Chana Kong unhesitatingly bit her finger to draw blood, condensed her iron sword, and charged forward. She braced her blade against the junction of the room's walls, trying to stop the continuously shrinking room, but soon enough, cracks appeared on the iron blade. Chana Kong continued to bite her finger hard, using the flowing blood to reinforce the body of the iron blade. Despite this, Chana Kong's blade and hands trembled from the force of the walls. Just as Jaiwan Yun shouted for Chana Kong to stop, I dashed forward and directly stopped her. As the iron sword snapped into two with a cracking sound, Chana Kong's eyes gradually filled with despair, and tears quietly escaped her eyes, while her pupils remained fixed on the drawing on the wall that was gradually being engulfed. Right as the entire inner room was about to be eliminated, I managed to pull Chana Kong out just in time. By this time, the tremors from the shrinking room also stopped, and Chana Kong fainted due to excessive blood loss. Feeling a bit confused, I asked Jaiwan Yun why Chana Kong went to such lengths. Jaiwan Yun said that this place was actually Chana Kong's grandmother's house. It was in this very house that she lost her grandmother and younger brother brother, survived alone, and obtained her ability. I felt somewhat ashamed to learn that such a tragedy had occurred. However, right now, the most important thing was how to get out, because we didn't know if the next shrinkage would make the entire house disappear. We had to take action before the walls moved again, and the tiny cracks on the wall before us became our hope. It seemed like this time, slow and steady will win the race. Hours passed since we hatched our new plan. We tried constantly scratching the cracks with small knives, attempting to widen them, taking turns continuously throughout the entire night. Everyone was exhausted, and even Chana-Kong, who had just woken up, joined in. I scratched my head and said to Chana-Kong that I heard this was her grandmother's house, and even though nobody lived here, it looked very clean, so it seemed she usually came back to clean it. But Chana-Kong said she was waiting for the knackle that killed her family. I asked her how she knew that knackle would return, because that knackle was different from other knackles. Back then, the iron blade knackle wasn't the only one that appeared in her house. There was another knackle that looked almost like a human. It appeared to have some kind of objective and also possessed intelligence, unlike other knackles that merely wanted to take human lives. And within a year, when knackles swarmed into the world, that guy would inevitably appear again. This was also the reason she had stayed in G Island all along. She wondered if I had a negative opinion that she only cares about the knackle that killed her family. However, I was honest and said I didn't even have a noble sense of duty. Rather, the pay was decent enough. Hearing this, Chana-Kong turned around and assumed it meant I would be joining the city's headquarters, since the pay would be better there. She revealed that she actually saw what happened that day. Despite this, Chana-Kong knew I would do well there. But before she could continue, a rumbling in the house began once again. We could only move into the hallway. By morning, the house had shrunk by a third. A whole night of this left us panting heavily from exhaustion. To the side, I noticed Officer Abakim's condition. He was still laying on the floor asleep. Just when I thought we could rest a bit, the house started shaking again. I looked at Officer Abakim, who was still fast asleep beside me, and wanted to wake him up to hide together. But Officer Abakim suddenly stood up, and half of his face was covered with densely packed mold. He said that his task should be done by now. After saying that, the originally tightly shut door suddenly opened, and the hermit knackle, its head covered in mold, ran out in agony. This shocking scene made us frantically ask Abakim what ability he had exactly used to make a homebody hermit knackle run out on its own. It turned out he had the mold spore knackle powers, also known as the slow killer. It was just that it took a longer time to use, so after putting mold into the door crack, he simply went to sleep. We swept away our previous dejection and praised him in unison for his excellent ability. But at this moment, Eden Sin was shouted loudly, telling us to stop chatting because the situation seemed to have turned quite bad. Because it seemed there was more than one hermit knackle. A whole horde of hermit knackles swarmed out from the room. I was a bit terrified. I clearly only saw one knackle through the keyhole earlier, so how could so many hermit knackles suddenly pop out? Moreover, these were authentic level 7 knackles. How were we supposed to fend off their attacks? While I was thinking, the hermit army had already lunged at us. Seeing this, Chana-Kong instantly activated her ability, while telling Yoseok Nam to use his ability to hide the team members. And Yoseok's knackle ability was Invisibility Field. Within the domain he cast, he could make any creature completely lack presence, thereby achieving an invisible effect. After speaking, Chana-Kong charged forward with her iron sword. With just a single strike, she ended the life of the first knackle that approached. Unexpectedly, she was restricted by the hallway, her sword getting stuck into the narrow walls. Seeing a hermit knackle stepping on the iron sword and lunging forward, I promptly left the invisibility field, leaped, and bit the knackle, causing it to be held in place by me. In just a moment, it had died from my devour ability. Just then, Yoseok shouted in terror that the ceiling was descending. The hermit knackles were going to completely shrink and cave in the hallway. Seeing this, a flash of light appeared on my forehead as the mirror knackles power activated. Copying the hermit knackles power, I commanded the ceiling to stop. However, it resulted in yet another funny looking pose. Seeing this silly form, Yoseok still couldn't help but compliment that it actually worked. This also gave the other knackles an opportunity to lunge at me violently. But just then, their heads rotated and were forcibly snapped off. Eden Sinwa cursed me as an idiot, telling me to go inside Yoseok's invisibility field. But I told him to watch his back, because at this moment, several knackles had already entangled his body and bitten his arm. However, the clinging knackles were suddenly attacked, getting precisely pierced in their vital points. At this time, a massive spider suddenly appeared that had killed the knackles with its sharp legs. I never expected that Jaiwan Yun's little spider was actually such a behemoth. Yoseok immediately issued an order for Eden Sinwa to go help Chana-Kong, while he and Jaiwan Yun would be responsible for protecting me so the space wouldn't collapse. Freed from having to watch their backs, the two level 7 knackalists began to fully unleash their skills, and their killing efficiency visibly and significantly increased. Right at this moment, Jaiwan Yun discovered the root of the problem through her spider senses. The hermit knackles were continuously surging out from the room where it was originally located. Hearing this, a hypothesis formed in my mind. In the next second, I deactivated my hermit knackle powers and left the invisibility field. I asked the two fighters to let me inside the room, and instantly, they cleared a path for me. Finding the opportunity, I leaped and dove into the room. The situation here was indeed exactly as I had expected. The room was packed packed with densely crowded nacles, while the hermit nacle's main body crouched in the corner, still continuously duplicating itself. It controlled these clones to go out and fight via red threads on its back, while hiding itself in this safe room. I raised my arm, since it liked hiding in the room so much, then it should stay here forever. After saying that, I used the hermit ability copied by the mirror knackle, causing this room to start collapsing and compressing, thereby utterly eradicating them. But I also had to escape from here before the room completely collapsed. Watching the ceiling rapidly descending and the doorway getting smaller and smaller, I ran as hard as I could, unsure if I could make it out in time. Fortunately, at this moment, Eden Sianwu and Chana Kong had already completely taken care of the hermit knackle clones outside. They arrived just in time and reached out their hands to me. Right before the collapse, I grabbed Eden Sianwu's arm, and he promptly pulled me out. With a loud boom, this room was completely removed, turning into a single wall. With this, the hermit knackle was also completely resolved. We heavily celebrated this victory of surviving a catastrophe. This time, I finally gained their recognition and they praised me non-stop, saying my mirror ability was really great, totally different from when I fought that stinky knackle from before. But while we were happily celebrating, Chana Kong wore a sorrowful expression. She stared at the vanished inner room for a long time, unable to snap out of it, because that was the most precious moment of her life. Looking at her sorrowful back, I felt sympathy for her. I had to do something, but the hermit knackle was already dead, and I couldn't use the mirror ability anymore. The only plan now was to eat the hermit knackle's flesh on the ground using Devour, and gain its abilities. With this in mind, I picked up the knackle's arm and took a bite, which terrified Yoziak. After eating enough flesh, I wiped my mouth clean. It was a good thing there was still yellow dust left in the house for the ability to activate. Everyone was shocked beyond belief watching the scene. The room began to be restored. The wall was sliding to reveal the room once again. I took steps forward to push the room even more. However, the amount of yellow dust wasn't enough, and the wall stopped moving once again. Just as I was thinking of holding on a bit longer, Chana Khan grabbed my arm and said it was enough. At this moment, her eyes were like a rainbow after the rain, like spring after a shower. Despite the room being reduced in size, it was definitely more than enough for Chana Khan, because the family portrait drawn by her younger brother was revealed once again. Later, back at the headquarters, Diakman Go returned from the collective training in B City carrying bread, only to find the office completely empty. He had gone to the trouble of bringing back bread from B City for everyone, only to find we had disappeared to who knows where. He searched every room but still couldn't find a single person. However, at this time, Director Ilda Jong called him. Diakman Go answered the call and asked what was up. Ilda Jong said that his invitation for me, Maruhan, to join the headquarters had been rejected, and asked if Diakman Go knew the reason. Hearing this, Diakman Go gave a hearty laugh. Perhaps that guy had adapted to the life of our G Island team, and at this moment, after tossing and turning all day, we were sound asleep. I didn't recover my senses until going to work the next day. The exhaustion from fighting the hermit knackle made my whole body feel soulless, and I even felt that going to work was truly an annoying chore. At this time, the honking sound of a car rang out, and a white luxury car suddenly pulled up to the side, and the person sitting in the car was exactly Eden Sianwu. Thinking that after yesterday's life and death struggle, we could be considered comrades in arms who had been through life and death together, right? So, I smiled and greeted him, saying since he and I were going the same way, he might as well give me a ride. But that guy Eden Sianwu showed a look of disgust, told me to scram, and then sped away in his car. Yoziak suddenly appeared behind me, saying he was so envious that Eden Sianwu drove an imported car. His personality was also super awful. Yoziak chimed in, saying no matter how handsome, wealthy, or good his resume was, what was the use if his personality was trash? He definitely had no friends. Having said that, we laughed out loud in unison, and when I arrived at the office, I was greeted head-on by team leader Diakman Go, who had a happy face. Welcome, our level 7 Nakalist, Mr. Maruhan. Hearing this, I pushed his head with my hand and asked what level 7 Nakalist he meant. Jaiwan Yun explained, didn't you use the Devour ability to eat a level 7 Nakal, so naturally didn't you become a level 7 Nakalist? She also added a word of congratulations. Following that, with a loud smack, Diakman Go said he thought I was incredibly weak, but he didn't expect this Devour ability to be so top tier. Yoziak noted that I was the only person whose ability could constantly level up, which was truly amazing. At that moment, I felt happier than I ever had before, because aside from my gentle, petite mother, this was the first time I had received recognition from so many people. But such a harmonious scene made Eden Sianwu slam the table in extreme dissatisfaction. He claimed that he was trying to work, so we should stop with the chattering. I looked at Eden Sianwu's gloomy eyes, feeling confused. I wasn't being annoying, so why did he keep staring at me? Just at this moment, a slender hand rested on my shoulder. Chana Khan approached me and said she wanted to chat with me outside. Subsequently, we sat on the chairs outside. I asked her formally what she wanted to talk about. She said she wanted to thank me for what I did at her grandmother's house. Hearing this, I said, aren't we in the same team? It was what I ought to do, and told her that it was no problem at all. But at this moment, she claimed that she had always had a special opinion of me. Instantly, I felt my heart race and my face turn completely red, wondering what she meant by her opinion of me. Then she told me very seriously that she felt I wasn't a level 1 nacolist. Hearing this, I asked her what she meant by saying I wasn't a level 1 nacolist. She said that based on my kind of recovery power and the ability to eat other nacals, this absolutely couldn't be something a level 1 nacolist possessed. Hearing this, I started to realize it too. So the level 1 nacal I encountered that day wasn't a Devour nacal. Chana-Kong told me to think carefully about whether I had encountered any other nacals before becoming a special recruit. But no matter how I thought about it, this was an impossible thing, because how could I possibly forget such an important event? Just at this moment, I saw a plume of black smoke rising not far behind Chana-Kong. Moreover, inside the black smoke, it looked as if something was about to pop out. Instantly, my heart started racing frantically. That was the monster that had suddenly inserted itself into my memory before, yet it appeared here right now. This triggered my panic disorder, which I thought had disappeared, to flare up again. Seeing my agonizing, crawling expression, Chana-Kong anxiously asked what was wrong and if I was okay. I grabbed my hair tightly and answered her that I was fine. Sometimes I would see some terrible things. Hearing this, Chana-Kong grabbed my hand and told me not to be afraid, that she was by my side, and it was very safe here. With her doing this, I instantly felt my panic disappear, replaced by a flushed red face. And looking at me, she was also certain that something must have happened in my past. Right at this moment, Go suddenly appeared, asking if we were dating. Hearing this, my face flushed with embarrassment as I waved my hands to explain, but Chana-Kong calmly stood up and said no. She added that if nacals swarmed in within a year, we would all die, so what was the point of dating? She had absolutely no interest. Those icy words pierced my heart like a sharp knife. This was way too cruel, wasn't it? Was it me she had no interest in, or the act of dating? These words absolutely killed me on the bench as Chana-Kong walked away. Young man, it seems you've been dumped. Although the situation wasn't at all what he thought. Looking at Chana-Kong's retreating back, I still felt a little hurt. Time passed very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, there was only an hour left before getting off work. So Jaiwan Yin told everyone to go check the yellow dust alarms, except for those who needed to stay behind on duty. And Chana-Kong and I were assigned to a group to check the area where we lived. Chana-Kong was recording the frequency of the yellow dust detections, while I was still thinking about our previous conversation. If everyone was going to die as Officer Kong said, then naturally there was no need to think about those pointless things. I had to think more about how to survive the nacals, but whenever I thought about how little clues we had regarding them, I felt it would be great if we could communicate with them. However, at this moment, the ring of a phone echoed in the mountains, and this was a phone that could only be used when emergency support was needed. Yoziak on the phone was heavily injured at this moment, saying a nacal had appeared in Zone 3, and he and team leader Diakman Go were both injured. Moreover, that nacal was heading our way, and he told us we must absolutely be careful of what the nacal said. After listening, Chana-Kong's face was full of shock. How could it be? Since team leader Gao was a level 10 nacalist, how could even he get injured? Hearing this, I looked utterly incredulous. That frivolous-looking uncle in my eyes was actually a level 10 nacalist. Yellow dust filled the surroundings. That nacal had arrived. Chana-Kong told me to be careful, as that was a guy even a level 10 nacalist couldn't match. Within the yellow dust, a dark silhouette resembling a sniper scope gradually emerged. It was a nacal with a large hole in its head, and the very first thing it did upon seeing us was actually to use a human voice to say to us, "Hello there. Nice to meet you. Do you mind if we have a conversation?" At this moment, I didn't understand why it could talk like a human. Chana-Kong said this should be a language nacal. The language nacal told us not to be hostile toward it. It said it wasn't here to fight us, but just wanted to chat. I asked it what it wanted to talk about. Chana-Kong told me not to speak to it, as Yoziak had already warned her about this, but I thought this was actually a good opportunity to understand nacals. They came to kill us, yet we knew absolutely nothing about them. With that in mind, I asked the nacal where they came from. The language nacal answered that it came from the abyss. I asked it what kind of place the abyss was. It said the abyss was the deepest part of hell. People who committed heinous crimes while alive would be trapped in that place, engaged in endless battles in the darkness. Could it be that these nacals were all humans when they were alive? You were right, the nacals were once humans too. Upon it saying that, my pupils instantly widened in shock, and Chana-Kong shared the same reaction. How could this be? If nacals were humans when they were alive, then what exactly had I been eating all this time? With this thought, I couldn't help but vomit profusely. At this time, the nacal said it was its turn to ask questions now, but just as I was wondering what question it would ask, Chana-Kong grabbed my arm, telling me not to converse with it anymore. Even if it looked friendly on the surface, it was still the guy who attacked their teammates. As she spoke, the spear in her hand had already formed. Seeing this, the language nacal raised its hands, telling her to stop, as it disliked violence. But Chana-Kong, holding her spear, directly launched an explosive dash forward. But just as the spear was about to pierce the nacal's neck, a voice suddenly emanated from the language nacal. "Even if you kill me, you cannot avenge your younger brother." The language nacal pushed away the spear that was mere millimeters from its neck. "Because it's your fault that her younger brother died." At that moment, time seemed to stand still in Chana-Kong's world, taking her back to that tragic night. Her younger brother's chest was pierced by an iron sword, but that strike from the iron nacal was clearly aimed at her, yet her younger brother took the blow for her. With agonizing eyes, he could only say, "Sister, run away." With the retraction of the iron sword, the life was taken away from her younger brother. Chana-Kong hugged her younger brother's body and wept bitterly. Back in the present, a trace of blood spilled from the corner of her mouth. Your younger brother died to protect you. As an older sister, shouldn't you be the one protecting your younger brother? Seeing Chana-Kong suddenly fall to her knees, I yelled out for Officer Kong and immediately dashed forward, catching her just as she was about to hit the ground. However, looking at the wound piercing her heart left me utterly shocked. We clearly hadn't even seen the language knuckle attack. So what on earth was going on with the wound that appeared on her body? Could it be that this knuckles attack method was to use words to strike, thereby inflicting mental trauma? Alright, let's continue our chat. Stop paying attention to that person who was grieving over her dead family. Hearing this, I told it to shut its stinking mouth. How could I possibly continue chatting with a knuckle that casually made thoughtless remarks about the pain of others? As I spoke, my furious fist smashed fiercely into the language knuckle's face. Before the knuckle could even react, its body was smashed heavily into the ground. Next, I took the opportunity to attack once again, jumping up in the air. Just then, the language knuckle spoke up once again. Why are you getting angry for her? You were clearly dumped by that woman. The moment those words came out, I froze entirely in place. I found that my body actually couldn't move at all. At the same time, in a blind spot I couldn't see, a thread shot out suddenly. A wound inexplicably burst open on my chest. Something had pierced my heart, but this was clearly not a situation where I was feeling heartbroken. So why was it still able to inflict an attack on me? I looked at Chana-Kong on the ground, thinking to myself that I hadn't even considered her as a romantic interest. I merely felt she was a powerful and cool senior. At this time, Chana-Kong was still immersed in her memories. Your older sister is sorry, Lil Yun. I clutched my chest, wondering how the after effects of this attack could last so long. Meanwhile, the language knuckle beside us picked up a rock from the ground. It continued to say that emotions like this really make people become very fragile, although it had never felt them even when it was human. It suddenly leaned down, asking why I wasn't speaking, and if I was now entirely incapable of even talking. At this moment, I understood that as long as someone possessed emotions, they couldn't withstand the heartbreak attack. This was also the reason why the level 10 team leader Diakman Go had been injured. Unless a cold-blooded person who wouldn't be affected by heartbreak came to save us, Chana-Kong and I were truly going to meet our end here today. Just as the rock picked up by the language knuckle was about to smash right into me, its entire body suddenly began to twist with a cracking sound. It turned out that Eden Sinwo had arrived right on time. He asked me, "Why are you on the ground?" Seeing Eden Sinwo arrive, I celebrated that this psycho had finally shown up. But upon seeing me, Eden Sinwo roared, asking what I was grinning like an idiot for. But right at this moment, the language knuckle's voice rang out once again. "Your attack seems a bit ticklish." The language knuckle stated that its vocal cords were extremely tough. An attack of this level was not enough to snap them. It also mocked us, saying that we rookies still needed to work harder. Hearing this, Eden Sinwo and I took special notice of this knuckle again, igniting a surge of fury in both Eden Sinwo's and my hearts. We were unable to accept this kind of mockery from this guy. However, I still reminded Eden Sinwo to be careful, as that guy could read human memories and thereby attack the most vulnerable part of one's heart. But Eden Sinwo told me to shut up, saying he didn't need a rookie's warning, and told me to just shut my mouth and watch from the sidelines. Hearing this, I thought to myself that this guy truly was an absolute psycho. At the same time, after loosening up his joints a bit, Eden Sinwo snapped his fingers and activated his knuckle ability. This strike directly inflicted heavy damage on the knuckle's leg. But at this moment, the language knuckle already read Eden Sinwo's memory. It claimed that his father will never respect him, yet Eden Sinwo remained completely unaffected. He merely continued to snap his fingers to activate his ability, causing the bones all over the language knuckle's body to emit cracking sounds as they fractured. "So you are emotionless just like me." Sure enough, the children of a woman who was abandoned by her husband, went mad, and committed suicide will all end up like this. Upon hearing this, Eden Sinwo predictably darkened his face and lowered his head. I was also greatly shocked that Eden Sinwo's background was so tragic. I had previously thought he was just a pampered rich kid. However, even if he was a psycho, being attacked like this must have surely pushed him to his limit. Thinking this, just as I was preparing to step forward to stop it, Eden Sinwo, who had a dark face a second ago, suddenly burst into laughter. "So what? It's not my fault that my mother was weak. Only by being strong enough can one survive. Looking at it this way, you won't survive to the end either, because you are even weaker than Maruhan." In that instant, Eden Sinwo froze. Even his mother's death couldn't affect him, yet he actually suffered heartbreak just because of a sentence claiming he was weaker than me. At the same time, the language knuckle abruptly shot out a gleam of a blade. Just as it was about to pierce Eden Sinwo's heart, I managed to block it in time with my arm. I had finally figured out this guy's attack pattern. First, it used heartbreak attacks to plunge people into despair, and then it utilized the tongue blade shot from its mouth to pierce their hearts. Right at this moment, the awakened Chana-Kong flashed over and severed the knuckle's tongue blade with a single sword strike. This caused the language knuckle to let out a violent, agonizing scream. Chana-Kong asked if we were alright, but seeing her smooth, incredibly cool demeanor, it actually made my cheeks flush red and my breathing become rapid for a moment. However, I shook my head, trying hard to clear my mind. I kept shaking Eden Sinwo's body, but it still had no effect. He kept muttering that it said he was weaker than than me. I scratched my nose, never expecting him to be this jealous of me. Snap out of it. Don't be influenced by that guy's words. Although I am also very outstanding, you are even more outstanding than me. As soon as I said that, Eden Sienwa's body trembled slightly. Of course, I am level 7, you are level 1. Meanwhile, the language knackle could only wildly swing the remaining tongue blade to prevent us from approaching. I knew that if we didn't eliminate it promptly now, it would only be more disadvantageous for us once night fell. But because of its tongue blade, we simply had no way to get close right now. Chana Kong, however, said to leave this problem to her to solve. She believed this was a good opportunity while the knackle couldn't speak, but Eden Sienwa stopped her, asking if she was going to fight the knackle in her current state. It was only then that Chana Kong realized the wound caused by the language knackle had actually not healed yet. At the same time, I also realized that as long as that knackle was alive, the heartbreak attack was still effective, and the inflicted wounds would not heal. Considering our current situation, I knew I had to do something. I made insulting, mocking gestures, wanting to lure the language knackle into following me. The plan worked and the language knackle charged right at me. I'll leave Officer Kong to you. I'll take care of this knackle. But Eden Sienwa cursed me for being an idiot, saying that my current ability could only be used within an enclosed space. Upon hearing this, Chana Kong immediately told Eden Sienwa to ignore her and hurry up to help me. Meanwhile, I led the language knackle into a patch of forest. While sprinting, I looked around to see if there was an enclosed space nearby. But right now, apart from trees, there were simply no structures to be seen. Just as I was wondering what to do, a white car suddenly stopped on the road beneath my feet. Eden Sienwa opened the car door and shouted for me to hurry over to him. Seeing this, I smashed through the guardrail and leaped down, thinking to myself that this guy Eden Sienwa was truly willing to sacrifice his expensive car. It really made one envious. While thinking, my entire body dove into the car, and I reached out my hand to mock the knackle once again. Come over here. And the language knackle predictably couldn't stand the mockery, following me right into the car. Eden Sienwa slammed the car door shut from the outside, shouting, "It's closed." Hearing the signal, I squeezed out from the other side. But just as I was closing the door, the language knackle's tongue blade shot out fiercely at this moment, directly slicing my entire body, including my head, into pieces. Just as the language knackle thought it had taken care of me and opened the car door, a hand grabbed its neck from behind. It turned its head to look and was greatly shocked, because not only was I not dead, but several identical versions of me had appeared inside the car. It turned out that what it had just sliced into pieces with its tongue blade was merely a clone, while the main body was still inside the car, continuously splitting and creating more clones. At this moment, my clones dragged it directly into the car, and began to continuously bite and tear at it with their teeth. At this moment, Eden Sienwa continuously pounded on the car window, asking how long I was going to stay inside. Why isn't this guy getting out? At this time, Chana Kong also rushed over to the scene and asked Eden Sienwa where I had gone. Meanwhile, the language knackle once again launched its verbal attacks. Actually, we can resolve this through conversation. Were you always this violent? Like your father? Another dormant memory violently surfaced in my mind. I saw my childhood self being grabbed by the collar by my father, who kept muttering something incomprehensible. When such a violent father disappeared, you must have been incredibly happy and relieved, right? To block off its verbal attacks, I used my hands to continuously smack my own ears, until my eardrums were forcefully shattered. That's enough. Stop playing with other people's emotions. Just as it was about to open its mouth to continue launching verbal attacks, I clamped my hand over its mouth, while simultaneously having the clones firmly pinned down its entire body. As I clenched my fist, the Hermit Knackle's ability was instantly activated. The body of the white car was rapidly compressed. Chana Kong screamed hoarsely, trying to stop it, but was held back by Eden Sienwa. Following a loud cracking boom, the white car was instantly compressed into a lump, and blood exploded outward from it like fireworks. The expressions of the two were as silent as death. At the same time, the surrounding yellow dust was gradually disappearing, which meant the language knackle was completely dead. At this moment, Chana Kong pried forcefully at the car body, trying to pull me out from within, but Eden Sienwa told her it was already too late. He believed I was already dead. She said my recovery power was different from ordinary knackleists, and as long as she pulled me out before the yellow dust disappeared, I might just live. Seeing Chana Kong so persistent, Eden Sienwa also joined in, cursing me for being a true idiot while prying, actually choosing to perish together with the knackle. Meanwhile, I arrived in a strange space. My vision was pitch black, and my body had lost all sensation. The language knackle was gone now, but I was still very curious about what exactly that guy wanted to say at the very end. And right at this moment, the language knackle's voice rang in my ears once again. It said the abyss was looking for me, and told me to remember my mission. Just as I groggily asked what mission, the language knackle roared loudly, "Wake up," making me snap my eyes open. Before I could wonder what this place was, a gurgling sound came from my stomach. Suddenly, my clothes were violently pierced, and a hand emerged from my stomach. Next, that wolf-like monster that only existed in my memories appeared right before my eyes. It held my face and asked if I still remembered it. Covered in cold sweat, I looked at it in terror, and a sealed memory reopened in my mind. I saw my childhood self staring forward with a face full of terror. That was a monster covered entirely in mouths, continuously dripping saliva. "Dad, it's a monster monster. We have to escape quickly. But my father hoisted me up and said that from now on, I had to fight that guy. With tears streaming down my face, I asked him why. My father said he wanted me to obtain its special knuckle power so that I could enter the abyss. I was dragged on the ground by my father, constantly begging for mercy, but he simply tossed me straight toward the knuckle. This was a memory I never wanted to recall ever again. At the same time, Eden Scene was snapped his fingers to activate his ability while the yellow dust hadn't completely disappeared yet. The compressed car door popped open. He hurriedly pulled away the remaining debris and finally found me inside. My entire body's bones were twisted and crushed into a lump. Eden Scene and Chana Kong looked at this scene with widened pupils. It was hopeless. Even the healing yellow dust had completely vanished. It was impossible for him to survive. Eden Scene could only look away as Chana Kong checked on my crushed body. She tried to call out to me, but just then, my hand suddenly grabbed her hand. Seeing this, Eden Scene and Chana Kong couldn't believe their eyes, because I was actually producing my own yellow dust, just like a knuckle. The next moment, my crushed bones began to crack, recovering back to my original state, until I could eventually emerge from the crushed white car. As I emerged from the crushed car, back from the dead, this exaggerated scene caused the two level 7 knuckleists beside me to widen their eyes in shock. However, after recovering, I collapsed onto the ground and falling asleep as if nothing had happened. This scene completely stunned Eden Sienwu and Chana Kong. This caused Eden Sienwu to frantically stomp on my back with his foot, questioning what the hell I was. Woken up by the stomping, I turned around with a bewildered face, but Eden Sienwu grabbed me by the collar, lifted me up, and said I had just spewed out yellow dust like a knuckle, asking me if this was also the Devour Knuckles ability. Being told this by him, I suddenly remembered that I had recalled a forgotten memory. The Devour ability wasn't something I had recently awakened. I already had it since I was a child, and this was all because of my father's doing. But just as I was wondering why my father would do such a thing, my long dormant panic disorder flared up again. Seeing me groveling on the ground, Eden Sienwu loudly asked what was wrong with me and why I suddenly collapsed on the ground. Chana Kong said it was probably my panic disorder acting up, telling Eden Sienwu not to disturb me and let me rest a bit. She also said to just treat this matter as a secret among the three of us. But Eden Sienwu dismissed the idea, claiming that I was half monster and that they should tell the headquarters. Chana Kong patiently explained to him, saying they currently still didn't know why I could spew yellow dust. At this moment, Eden Sienwu was worried if I would become just as dangerous as a knuckle, but Chana Kong didn't believe I would do anything dangerous. Eden Sienwu turned his head to glance at me groveling on the ground. Whatever, I don't care what he turns into anyway. And so, the three of us reached an agreement at this moment, treating the fact that I could spew yellow dust as a secret. After this incident, after sobering up and learning that I could spew yellow dust just like a knuckle, I felt extremely depressed. What exactly was going on with the Devour Knuckle? Why was I able to spew yellow dust just like a knuckle? Just then, I saw hallucination before my eyes again. I saw my reflection on the train glass morph into the appearance of the Devour Knuckle. In an instant, I was so frightened that I stumbled backward, and this was exactly witnessed by Yoziak Nam beside me. I clutched my chest, saying I had seen a strange phantom. I asked if he had time to chat with me, but Yoziak Nam refused, saying his strict rule was not to meet with colleagues after work. His words made me feel a bit sad. Yoziak Nam was the most approachable person on the team. Right after, Yoziak Nam answered a call that he received and found that it was actually his former colleague, Wooju, contacting him. Later, inside a drinking bar, Yoziak Nam drunkenly pointing at Wooju, telling him to apply for a transfer and leave the Jiang Mountain team. But Wooju didn't answer him immediately. Instead, he asked Yoziak Nam who the person sitting next to him was. Seeing this, Yoziak Nam also complained to me, asking why I tagged along. Lying on the table, I told him I was feeling very sad too and didn't want to be alone. I wondered why this Wooju wanted to leave from his current team. It turned out that Wooju was relentlessly bullied within the Jiang Mountain team and wanted to resign, so he called Yoziak Nam over. Yoziak Nam advised Wooju to make a commotion and get kicked out like himself. It meant that Yoziak Nam used to be part of the Jiang Mountain team as well, and was also the one bullied the most severely in the team back then. Hearing this, I was incredibly furious. What kind of people were in this Jiang Mountain team? How could they go so overboard? Yoziak Nam claimed that those guys were a bunch of demons, a group of human scum gathered together. He told me very seriously that there were also many bad people among the special civil servants. Those guys were just as dangerous as Knuckles. Hearing this, I suddenly recalled the words Eden Sienwu had said during the day. I wondered to myself, would I also become as dangerous as a knuckle? Later, I carried Wooju, who was passed out drunk, back to his house, following Yoziak Nam. Just in front of us was his parents' noodle shop, but as soon as Yoziak Nam opened the shop door, his eyes widened in shock at the scene before him. Sitting inside the shop were exactly the members of the Jiang Mountain team. Just as Yoziak Nam was at a loss for what to do, a sturdy chest bumped into him. A red-haired man stared at Yoziak Nam with a smiling face, saying he originally came looking for Wooju, but didn't expect the pleasant surprise of running into him, Yoziak Nam. After speaking, he actually kicked Yoziak Nam directly to the ground. Then, he began to frantically stomp on the fallen Yoziak Nam, saying that if he wanted to leave the team, he should have just left quietly. He was still incredibly furious for what Yoseok Nam had done to them. At this moment, I grabbed the red-haired man's arm, saying that we were all part of the special civil service, so why assault each other? The red-haired man glared at me fiercely and asked who I was. I answered that, like Officer Nan, I was also a member of the G Island team. But upon hearing this, the red-haired man burst into loud laughter. Before I could react, he punched me right in the face. The blow sent Wooju and me flying away. You pieces of trash. All of you are disgusting. I can't stand weaklings like you. It pisses me off. At this moment, I wiped the blood off of my mouth. My eyes had actually turned a golden yellow, and yellow dust started to come out of my mouth. Just then, the red-haired man mounted Yoseok Nam, complaining that because Yoseok Nam reported them to headquarters, the team had been penalized for several months. He had been looking for Yoseok Nam all this time, wanting to kill him. Seeing this, the members of the Jiang Mountain team didn't intervene at all. Instead, they all watched the show with smiling faces. At this moment, I was extremely enraged. Wisps of yellow dust involuntarily began to seep from my mouth. Right at this moment, the shop door suddenly opened. Before the red-haired man could react, a sturdy foot flew right into his face. He was knocked heavily to the ground. The Jiang Mountain team members collectively stood up at this moment, questioning the newcomer about who he was. Eden Sinwa stated he was a member of the G Island team, the ones they called weaklings. In the next second, he dashed over to me, warning me that if I dared to spew yellow dust here, I was dead meat. I hastily covered my mouth. It turned out Eden Sinwa was afraid I would cause trouble, so he had been secretly tailing me since we got off work. But he wasn't the only one tailing me. There was also Chana Khan. Upon entering the shop, Chana Khan was initially startled, then immediately stepped forward to ask about Yoseok Nam's condition. Chana Khan said that although she didn't know why they beat up a member of her team, she had to take Yoseok Nam away right now. The clown girl said no way. Our people beat their teammate half to death, so naturally, they couldn't let us leave so easily. At the same time, the bespectacled man said that as Yoseok Nam's colleagues, there were some things they hadn't settled yet. Chana Khan questioned if did they really have to stir up trouble and face punishment, but the clown girl figured the ones who would be punished were us. And just as the two sides argued endlessly, the beaten red-haired man recovered at this moment. The very first thing he did upon getting up was to launch an explosive dash toward Eden Sinwa. Eden Sinwa smiled wickedly. This was exactly what he wanted, and he simultaneously dashed forward, charging at the multiple enemies. Seeing this, I didn't want to watch Eden Sinwa fight 1 against 2, but just then, Officer Khan behind me told me to stay put where I was, saying it would be trouble if I transformed. Having said that, she scanned the situation inside the shop and found a handy weapon in a corner. At this moment, Eden Sinwa had his hands restrained from behind by the bespectacled man. Meanwhile, the red-haired man picked up a chair in front of him, preparing to smash it violently into Eden Sinwa's head. But just at this moment, an attack struck his side before he could make his move. A broom was expertly wielded in Chana Kang's hands. Next, she delivered a strike to the bespectacled man's leg, making him groan in pain and roll continuously on the ground. Chana Kang pointed the broken broom at the red-haired man. If he didn't want to keep taking a beating, he should stop. But at this moment, a sleepy-eyed, creepy middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the shop, saying he just went to the restroom. So how did they end up fighting civilians? Chana Kang asked who he was. It turns out that he was the team leader of the Jiang Mountain team. Hearing this, Chana Kang reported the situation to the Jiang Mountain team leader, stating that their team members injured our G Island team member, and she hoped he could handle the situation properly. But before Chana Kang could finish speaking, the creepy middle-aged man's fist smashed into her face, saying that since we weren't civilians, we shouldn't casually mess with his people. Looking at Officer Khan collapsing heavily to the ground, a surge of rage ignited in my heart. Yellow dust involuntarily began to spew from my mouth once again. Eden Sinwa beside me wanted to stop me upon seeing this, but I executed an explosive dash directly in front of the Jiang Mountain team leader. Before he could react, my fist had already smashed into his face. The strike, carrying the yellow dust ability, sent him crashing into the wall, knocking out the Jiang Mountain team leader out. Seeing the room filled with yellow dust, the Jiang Mountain team was collectively shocked beyond belief. Eden Sinwa felt that things had gone horribly wrong. Meanwhile, I walked to Chana Kang's side and asked if she was okay, but she reminded me not to use the yellow dust. I apologized to her, saying that seeing her get hit, I got angry and unknowingly spewed out the yellow dust. But at this moment, the heavily struck Jiang Mountain team leader laughed heartily. He said that I clearly wasn't a knackle, yet I could spew yellow dust. He asked me exactly what kind of person I was, and even invited me to join their team. But whenever I thought of the things Yoseok Nam had said in the bar, I rejected him without hesitation. I would never join a scumbag team like that. Hearing this, the Jiang Mountain team leader was truly disappointed, and that he couldn't just easily let us off the hook today then. Moreover, since the yellow dust here was currently very dense, he wanted to have a match between the Jiang Mountain team and the G Island team. One thing was made very clear to us at this moment. These guys truly were the worst of the worst. Yet the creepy middle-aged man sat calmly on a stool while calling for everyone to line up and get ready. Chana Kang stepped forward and waved her hand to refuse, saying this was way too absurd. But the creepy middle-aged man began explaining the rules. He stated it would be a 1v1 setup with a total of 3 rounds. The winning side could take Yoseok Nam away, way. And also to the knuckle guy over there. If headquarters finds out about your ability to spew yellow dust, they definitely won't let you off easily. If I agreed to fight, he would keep his mouth shut and treat my ability to spew yellow dust as a secret. Chana-kan understood that even the team leader acted like that. It was simply impossible to reason with them. Eden-sen was suggested, why not just beat their team leader to the ground first? But Chana-kan said that wouldn't work. If we did that, the situation would only get worse. The creepy middle-aged man continued, saying to just treat it as a friendly exchange between teams. The first side to surrender loses, but the rule is no killing, because that would be wrong to do. This left the three of us utterly confused. Since that's the case, let's fight. He also really wanted to try fighting another Nakalists. Are you crazy? Do you want to be just like those guys? Let's do as Eden-sen was said and fight a few rounds. However, she requested that during the fight, we must try our best to stall for time. Eden-sen and I both showed confused expressions. You'll know once you fight. Who's going first? Eden-sen wanted to go first. He didn't want to wait. On the other side, the creepy middle-aged man was also asking his team members who wanted to go. The bespectacled man revealed that the veins near his right eye bulged slightly as he used his ability. His ability was to analyze the opponent's ability through his eyes. In just a short moment, the bespectacled man said that Eden-sen will possess the effigy Nakalist's ability, causing damage to the opponent by fracturing parts of his own body. Hearing this, the red-haired man volunteered to go. He was eager to beat the opponent to a pulp. He forcefully clenched his charging fist. Then, his arm morphed into several branching, spiked twigs that shot explosively toward Eden-sen. But facing this incoming attack, Eden-sen seemed completely unbothered. He calmly and lightly snapped a finger, and the long, spiked branches attacking him all snapped and broke entirely. Is that all you've got? But the red-haired man smiled at this moment. The branches that had just been broken actually started wrapping around Eden-sen's entire body. Before long, Eden-sen was wrapped up like a mummy by the branches. At this moment, the red-haired man also started mocking Eden-sen. Would he choose to surrender like a coward? But Eden-sen cursed him as trash, saying he naturally had another part he could fracture. As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of a back molar crushing rang out. Following that, the branches binding Eden-sen's entire body instantly exploded. Eden-sen grabbed his neck. Let's have you taste the fracture of your fifth cervical vertebra first. As he snapped his finger, the opponent's fifth cervical vertebra instantly snapped. The red-haired man's entire lower body began to lose control, swaying and about to collapse. Don't be in a rush to pass out. The main event is next. Is your neck bone ready? But just as Eden-sen prepared to snap another finger to activate his ability, Chana-kan stopped him with one hand. Stop it. Are you trying to kill someone here? She then announced to the Jiang Mountain team leader that we won the first match. This agonizing pain made the red-haired man crawling on the ground vomit uncontrollably. He looked back and was instantly stunned by his team leader's creepy look. Alright then, let's continue. Chana-kan said Eden-sen's attack was too ruthless and failed to stall for much time. At this moment, having prepared for battle, Chana-kan beckoned with her finger. Who's next? The bespectacled man used his detection ability. Chana-kan could forge iron with blood and was an iron Nakalist. The only member who could fight her was the clown girl. Her ability was perfectly suited. After speaking, the clown girl reached her hand under her clothes. Next, two of her ribs were ripped out. This was the rib blade knuckle powers, which allowed her to use the bones in her entire body as weapons. Chana-kan reminded her that it was better not to use blades, as it was quite dangerous, but the clown girl didn't listen, proceeding to let the spinal column on her back emerge, transforming into sharp blades. Looking like a spider, she hovered in the air using the bone blades as legs. The clown girl didn't care about the danger. She launched a direct explosive dash forward. Seeing this, Chana-kan immediately bit her wrist. Just in time, she used her blood-forged blade to block the strike in time. The collision between the sharp blades produced a harsh screeching sound, but the clown girl had hidden another bone blade behind her back. While they were deadlocked, she pierced it directly into Chana-kan's side. Feeling the pain, Chana-kan knew she couldn't let this continue, so she used all her strength to swing a blade, knocking the opponent back. Then she dashed forward to close the distance. Taking advantage of the clown girl being airborne and unable to dodge, Chana-kan nimbly dodged and weaved through the connected attacks of the bone blades. Finding an opening as she closed in, she delivered an upward slash, slicing open the opponent's entire chest. This strike completely incapacitated the clown girl. She could only barely stand up by relying on the support of two teammates. After it was over, Chana-kan embarrassedly asked if she was okay. She said very apologetically that she hadn't adjusted her strength properly. This made Eden-sen and me praise her profusely for resolving the battle in just 10 seconds. You're really great at stalling for time, aren't you? Chana-kan blushed slightly and explained that this was because she had never fought humans before. It was a habit formed from only killing Nakals. Seeing 2 consecutive losses, the bespectacled man broke out in a cold sweat. Weren't the G Island team supposed to be a bunch of weaklings? What on earth was going on here? Alright, now all that's left is the match between him and me. It's already 2-0. There's no need to continue, right? That won't do. I endured watching 2 boring matches just to see his ability. Since it's the main event, how about we wager 3 points on the final match? Just as Chana-kan was about to object and refuse, I stepped forward. But the condition is, I fight you. This immediately immediately left Yoseok Nam and the other two looking shocked. The bespectacled man tried to use his analysis ability on me, but he saw something completely out of this world. The small creature in his eye could only tear his eye apart, causing it to explode right after taking that single look at me. He looked at me with eyes streaming with blood tears, full of terror, not understanding if I was truly just human. But my previous demand to specifically fight the creepy middle-aged man was rejected by him, saying it was a foul to fight him, the referee. However, he could send out their team's strongest guy to fight me, and this person was exactly Wooju, who had been drunk earlier. He was a bit confused as to why his team members were here, and asked with a face full of terror where his parents had gone. Following that, he gave Wooju a push forward, saying to let me fight Wooju, their team's strongest. Nearby, the teary-eyed Yoseok Nam stood up at this moment, trying to get his former team leader to stop. The creepy middle-aged man merely glared at him faintly, telling him to shut his mouth, wanting to deal with him later. With a tone full of threat, he told Wooju to perform well. Perhaps he might agree to his transfer request. Under the creepy middle-aged man's coercion, Wooju had no choice but to step forward helplessly. But at the moment the opponent stepped up, a look of shock appeared in my eyes, because at this moment, my language knackle ability had actually activated on its own without my realizing it. The language knackle inside me wanted to unleash a bombardment of verbal attacks, causing me to see scenes from Wooju's memories, and the deepest obsession within them was the memory of Yoseok Nam being bullied. Realizing I seemed to be starting to spout nonsense, and the blade inside my mouth was about to shoot out, I hurriedly clamped my hands tightly over my mouth, trying to stop all of this from happening. When Yoseok Nam took the bullying in your place, weren't you very happy too? As a bystander, didn't you feel glad it wasn't you? This sharp language struck the depths of his soul, fulfilling the condition for the heartbreak attack. The tongue blade shot out disobediently, piercing directly through his heart. I hurriedly leaned down to check on his condition, asking if he was okay and saying I couldn't control my ability. But Wooju, his eyes tightly shut, shed continuous tears while apologizing. Following that, to my astonished gaze, he directly activated his ability. A puddle of highly toxic liquid erupted outward from within his body, and this was exactly the venom knackle powers. At such close range, I simply couldn't dodge in time and my entire body was extensively soaked and corroded by the toxic liquid. Seeing the situation turn dire, Eden Sienwu and Chana Kong immediately wanted to step forward, but were stopped by the creepy middle-aged man. He reminded them not to meddle, as the match wasn't over yet. After saying that, the creepy middle-aged man asked if I wanted to choose to surrender right now. The deadly poison would corrode all my internal organs. I lifted my half-corroded face, revealing raw flesh. Are you kidding me? I never said I was surrendering. Then don't waste time. He told me to fully display my abilities. If you want to win, you have to attack him. Only then can this game end. To hell with your bullshit rules. As long as I beat you, the game ends all the same. But just as I closed the distance, the creepy middle-aged man remained completely calm. Since this game has started, it must follow my rules. After speaking, he suddenly yanked his tie tightly and shouted 8 times, activating his knackle ability. In an instant, I felt a continuous surge of power striking my body, forcing me to crash heavily onto the ground. At the same time, all the knacklists in the room were also pressed down, unable to do anything but crawl on the ground. What was this power suppressing his body? Meanwhile, Yoseok Nam, crawling on the ground and taking small, shallow breaths, told Eden Sienwu and Chana Kong that this was the Jiang Mountain team leader's ability, and told everyone to just lie on the ground and take small breaths. And this creepy middle-aged man was precisely a level 9 gravity knacklist. Looking at the scene of everyone kneeling on the ground in unison, he couldn't help but praise it. Next, he approached me again. He couldn't help but feel curious, asking what exactly my body was made of. The recovery speed could actually keep up with the corrosion rate of the acid. He planned to test what would happen if he applied gravity solely to me. The cervical vertebrae in my back emitted cracking sounds. A mouthful of fresh blood accompanied by yellow dust spewed from my mouth. The more painful it is, the denser the yellow dust spewed out. It seems the knackle that gave you your ability is quite special. Hearing him say special, my expression froze slightly. Thinking about it this way, the knackle in my memory was indeed quite special. Even though that guy was a knackle, it possessed eyes that knackles shouldn't have. But right now, I clearly knew it wasn't the time to think about that. I had to do something. To stop this guy, I had to use the language knackle's ability. But after I activated the ability, the language knackle didn't open its mouth to launch a verbal attack. As if it couldn't find the opponent's weak point, it kept its mouth tightly shut. This guy was a person completely immune to heartbreak. Just as I was thinking how a psychopath like this could be a knacklist, the creepy middle-aged man fished a short knife out of his pocket. He hated things he didn't understand the most. He said he would peel apart my structure to see where the yellow dust was coming from. Should I slice open the lungs to take a look first? Or maybe slice open your throat to see? But suddenly, the small knife pressed against my neck abruptly snapped into 2 halves. It turned out Eden Sienwu had activated his effigy ability at this moment, yelling that now was the time. At the same time, Chana Kong also bit her wrist to activate her ability. The instant the blood-forged blade was fully formed, she executed an explosive dash toward the creepy middle-aged man. But just as Chana Kong approached, the creepy middle-aged man yanked his tie tightly again. He increased the gravity acting upon us by 20 times. This sneak attack thereby ended in failure. earlier. No one could handle the force of the gravity anymore. The higher the gravity, the less oxygen our brains receive, until we finally faint completely. I worriedly called out for Officer Khan, thinking the creepy middle-aged man was going to do something to her, but unexpectedly, he merely took away the blood blade in Chana Kang's hand. Now no one is getting in the way. Let's continue our dissection game from earlier. At this time, I needed to figure out what to do next, because I felt like I was going to pass out from this intense gravity. But just then, the creepy middle-aged man turned his head because someone was actually knocking at the door. He shouted that the shop was already closed. However, upon hearing this, the person outside not only didn't leave, but something resembling a black liquid suddenly began to seep in from the outside through the crack of the door. In just an instant, it enveloped Chana Kang and the other two. Eden Sinwo broke out in a cold sweat, wondering to himself what the hell this was. But upon seeing this blackness, Chana Kang's heart finally breathed a sigh of relief. You're finally here. What took you so long? It turned out that when Eden Sinwo was fighting two Nakalists single-handedly, Chana Kang had been supporting Yoseok Nam while observing the scene inside the noodle shop. She actually managed to send a distress message to team leader Deokman Go, and at this moment, standing outside the shop door, Deokman Go activated his ability through the yellow dust seeping from the door crack. Black liquid continuously poured out from his eye sockets. This was the level 10 darkness knuckle powers. At this moment, I was filled with terror, wondering what this suddenly appearing blackness was. And the creepy middle-aged man was also trapped by this sticky, dark substance. In just the blink of an eye, it enveloped this entire space inside the shop. However, the creepy middle-aged man remained as calm as ever. Fully inside the darkness, I couldn't hear, smell, or feel anything. It made me anxious as it felt like I didn't even exist. In contrast, the creepy middle-aged man appeared completely composed while a pair of large hands appeared behind him. The next second, Deokman Go grabbed his neck with one hand and tightly gripped his blade with the other. But the creepy middle-aged man didn't feel any of this at all, not even his own breathing. He only felt his consciousness unable to think in that instant, and subsequently fainted, dropping to the ground. After team leader Deokman Go finished dealing with the creepy middle-aged man, he turned his gaze to me. At this moment, I was trembling uncontrollably in fear. Feeling absolutely nothing, I desperately hoped someone would come save me. Deokman Go forcefully grabbed my neck. That's enough. In the next moment, I completely passed out. After resolving everything, Deokman Go reached his hand into his shirt pocket and pulled out two eyeballs. Then, he placed them back into his eye sockets. As his eyes were restored, the dark power surrounding us also began to be gradually withdrawn. In just a short moment, all the dark power was completely retracted. Finally, this conflict had come to an end. Looking at me lying unconscious on the ground, Deokman Go was glad that the yellow dust had finally dissipated. Nearby, Chana Kang staggered to her feet. You're finally here. Deokman Go asked Chana Kang and Eden Sinwo why they hadn't reported the fact that I could produce my own yellow dust. It seems like you guys don't want to keep your jobs. Hearing this, Chana Kang lowered her head and admitted her mistake to him. Then she requested that Deokman Go and the Jiang Mountain team leader discuss how to resolve this matter. But team leader Deokman Go told her that since things had escalated to this point, there was no way to simply sweep it under the rug. Afterwards, I was taken back to headquarters and detained, kept under strict surveillance 24/7. I was forcefully handcuffed to a chair in an isolated room. Dejected, I lowered my head, unsure of what my fate would be. At the same time, in the director's meeting room, my future was being discussed. Vice Director Yang Eun-yu proposed that I should be managed by their headquarters from now on, but this decision met with a stern rejection from Deokman Go. Hearing this, Yang Eun-yu immediately stood up furiously, saying I could spew yellow dust myself just like an knuckle. Look at what happened with the Jiang Mountain team. What will be the consequences if he uses his ability in front of ordinary civilians? Yet hearing this, Deokman Go answered that the incident this time was an accident caused by the Jiang Mountain team's provocations. He believed in my character and was sure such a thing wouldn't happen again. They must know that the Jiang Mountain team leader specifically picked people with malicious natures to be his team members. To let a psycho like that head a team, wasn't that the director's responsibility? Conversely, Yang Eun-yu rebuked, asking how he could speak to the director like that in front of the staff. Il Jong waved his hand to indicate it was fine. He believed that the character wasn't very important in the special civil service, and it didn't matter if the Jiang Mountain team leader was a psycho. As long as he was indispensable in the fight against Nakles, that was enough. At the very least, they weren't like Deokman Go, who, out of hatred for the battlefield, hid in G Island like a coward. In that respect, Maruhan is the same. He is also indispensable in the battle against Nakles. Moreover, there is absolutely nothing wrong with his character. Besides, these two can control Maruhan better. Their bond is quite close. Il Jong then asked, if Maruhan caused trouble again, could he take responsibility? Of course I can. If there are no further objections, we'll be leaving. But just as the three of them were heading to the door to leave, Il Jong called out to Eden Sinwo, saying he had some things to discuss. Although Eden Sinwo was very reluctant, he had no choice but to accept. After this, thanks to team leader Deokman Go's strong guarantee, I was released. I hurriedly ran up to ask the team leader what was going on, and if I wouldn't be held accountable anymore. Hearing this, Deokman Go tugged at his tie, saying the punishment was that the three of us would be fined 3 months' salary. The moment I heard that, that, my heart turned to stone. Then the team leader told me to count my blessings. The only reason I came out unscathed this time was because the G Island team was willing to take responsibility. But if I caused trouble again, there was no telling what would happen. As he said that, he thought to himself that director Il Dejong was far more terrifying than imagined. The director asked Eden Sienwoo if I went berserk again, could he take responsibility for eliminating him? Hearing this, Eden Sienwoo was initially greatly shocked. What kind of talk is that? Next, he stood up and said he chose to refuse, adding that if this was all the other party had to say after not seeing each other for 20 years, then he was leaving. But director Il Dejong said this wasn't a request as a father, but an order as the director. The current Maruhan could no longer be viewed as an ordinary knackleist. Someone who could spew yellow dust on their own was no different from a knackle. It turns out that this director could very well be an enemy in the future. After being bailed out by the G Island team, I was also arranged to live in an apartment complex to stay with them. But as soon as I entered the house, I was utterly disgusted by the sight before me. The messily strewn clothes and the uncleaned, dirty items everywhere. How is this anything like the living environment of the G Island team? Even when I was preparing for exams back then, it never got this bad. At this moment, a shirtless, unkempt Diakman-go walked out. He said that from now on, I would be living here with him. Looking at his appearance, I felt a wave of horror and asked him if it really had to be this way. If we want to keep you from causing trouble, this is the only way. But even after work, you have to stay with me 24 hours a day. We can't be apart. The moment I arrived at work the next day, I felt the fiery, glaring gaze of Officer Jai Wen-yun. Unable to take it, I carefully asked her if she had something she wanted to say to me. Jai Wen-yun threatened that if I dared to spew yellow dust in the office, I was dead meat. Watching the drama unfold, Yo Seok Nam told Jai Wen-yun to stop, informing her that if I get angry, I start spewing yellow dust. Hearing his words, I immediately spun my chair around, looking completely shocked, as it was because of him that we were in that kind of situation. Unable to speak my mind, I could only let out a helpless sigh. However, this slight movement was caught by Baek Kim. He suddenly asked if I had let out yellow dust. Hearing this, team leader Diakman-go grabbed my mouth with one hand. He asked if the stress was too much. Would I also spew yellow dust when sighing? Afterwards, I went to the restroom looking indignant. Weren't these people purely treating me like a monster? Just as I reached the restroom door, I bumped right into Eden Sienwoo. Looking at me, he recalled the words his director father had said to him. I could no longer be viewed as an ordinary knackleist. Perhaps in the future, I might become the enemy of all knackleists. Seeing Eden Sienwoo also staring at me unblinking, I got very angry and yelled what he was looking at, and if he also wanted to nag me not to cause trouble. Whatever you become has nothing to do with me. I looked at his unusual behavior. Didn't this guy usually act like he wanted to eat me alive? Just at this moment, a voice from behind asked, "Are you okay?" When I turned around, I realized it was actually Chana Kong and the recently transferred Wooju. It turns out that today was Wooju's first day at the G Island team, and Chana Kong informed him that could ask any questions he had. Chana Kong wanted to check my eyes. I lowered my head, assuring her that I wasn't spewing yellow dust. Chana Kong gently told me not to feel bad about the team's actions. Everyone was just afraid that if another problem occurred, the G Island team wouldn't be able to protect me. Hearing her words, I felt some peace in my heart. But when everyone went out to handle tasks, I felt a wave of boredom and emptiness. Because they were afraid I would cause trouble again, all I could do now was desk duty. I looked at the printed documents just coming out of the printer and fell deep into thought. It turned out that the responsibility team leader Diakman-go spoke of meant absolutely forbidding me from going to the field. But just at this moment, the sound of the door opening interrupted my thoughts. I saw the brothers Nero and Namble walk in aggressively. Seeing the arrivals, I asked who they were, but I just saw Namble flash over, charging toward me with a raised fist. Before I could react, his fist smashed into my face. The violent force instantly sent me tumbling. Namble hauled me up, wanting to see me spew some yellow dust. I looked at this stranger who suddenly attacked me with rage. However, thinking of what Officer Chana Kong had told me earlier, my anger instantly dissipated. I absolutely could not cause trouble again. But Namble grabbed my collar and raised his fist high again, telling me to transform quickly, otherwise he would smash my face in. But the next second, a strong leg kicked him in the face. The one who intervened was none other than his brother, Nero. Nero pulled me up and apologized to me, saying his younger brother had no proper manners. He introduced them as Nero and Namble from headquarters. I asked if headquarters sent them to test me. Nero affirmed this, but his brother was so eager to see me because he was a fan of mine. I've heard so much about you, King Maru. Hearing the title King Maru, I held up my hands with an innocent expression. Namble was excited that I could actually spew yellow dust, and felt I was even more amazing than director Il Dejong. Namble thought I was the most amazing of all knackleists, admiring me immensely. Hearing this long overdue praise from someone else, I froze. Even after getting off work, I hadn't snapped out of it. Just at this moment, I saw Wooju standing helplessly ahead. I walked up and asked if something happened. At this moment, Wooju and I went up to his assigned area. It turned out the detectors and emergency communication equipment had malfunctioned, but after fiddling with them for a while, I still couldn't get any response. Wooju stuttered an apology. He probably accidentally broke them during the day. He didn't want to be hated by everyone here too, which was why he hadn't spoken up. However, even if he made a mistake in the G Island team, people wouldn't scold him him much. Everyone was very nice. At the same time, I actually wasn't so sure about this fact. Still, Wooju expressed his gratitude, and I told him it was perfectly fine. But what he said made me broke into a cold sweat, because he reassured me that I could spew yellow dust freely in front of him like I was doing now. "Are you not the one doing this, Officer Maruhan?" I realized something was wrong and quickly turned my head to check our surroundings. Sure enough, I spotted a small knackle on the side of the forest, and on its chest, there were 9 blood-pink beads. Hiding behind me, Wooju started blaming himself again, saying it was all his fault that the alarm couldn't sound now. Judging from the yellow dust concentration, it was probably just a level 1 knackle, and taking it out shouldn't be a problem. At the same time, I thought to myself that I had just been praised as King Maru during the day, so I pushed off hard with my feet and lunged at the knackle with my mouth wide open. Before the opponent could react, I bit into its neck. Considering the opponent was just a level 1 knackle, if I wanted to kill it in one shot, this was the only way. Subsequently, the knackle fell to the ground, unmoving. Seeing this, Wooju hurriedly clapped and praised, saying it was amazing to take down the opponent in just one move. But looking at the knackle corpse on the ground, I wasn't reassured, because the yellow dust hadn't disappeared. The knackle's corpse also began to crack, and the ensuing scene filled me with utter terror. I saw another knackle emerge from the level 1 knackle's corpse. Moreover, one of the blood beads on its chest shattered. Not only did this knackle not die, but it evolved into a level 2 knackle. After killing it several times, I was already panting heavily from exhaustion. But with every death, this knackle would turn into a stone cocoon, resurrecting as the blood bead on its chest shattered. Correspondingly, its level also became increasingly stronger. Based on the current yellow dust concentration, he judged that the knackle before them had already reached the threshold of level 5. Thinking this, he turned to head down the mountain to seek help from other team members, but the evolving knackle wouldn't give him that chance. In a flash, it bypassed me completely and delivered a handblade strike straight at Wooju's neck. But just in time, Wooju immediately unleashed his venom ability, and a puddle of toxic liquid instantly corroded most of the knackle's body. The fatally injured evolving knackle once again turned into a stone cocoon. In the next moment, as a crack formed on its forehead, the knackle broke out of the cocoon and evolved once again. This guy's strength level had already reached level 6. It was then I realized that the knackle before us was the evolving knackle, and with every evolution, a blood bead on its chest would burst. Based on the blood beads on its chest, this knackle could eventually evolve to level 10. Realizing this, I didn't hesitate to instruct Wooju. While I draw the knackle's attention, he must immediately go down the mountain to call for backup. However, Wooju was worried that I still had no way of fighting a level 6 knackle alone. I patted his shoulder, telling him not to worry. I was stronger than I looked. Then, I launched an explosive dash toward the knackle. Because I had consumed this guy's flesh, it meant that upon receiving a fatal wound, I could also evolve. My forward charging punch was easily dodged by it, and it countered with a devastating gut punch. Despite its strength, I wanted to endure, because I have to evolve as well to beat this thing. However, it wasn't over yet. The knackle's attacks rained down on me like a torrential storm, instantly pulverizing all my ribs. Logically, this degree of fatal injury should be enough to fulfill the condition for evolution, but I realized that my recovery speed was too fast. This slow inflicting fatal injury wasn't enough to trigger evolution. It could only be triggered instantly by a one-hit kill. Seeing the knackle's charged punch about to smash into my head, I prepared myself for evolution, but at this moment, Wooju used his ability to blast the knackle. However, his venom had completely lost its effect on a knackle that had already evolved to level 6. Sensing the attack, the knackle abandoned its assault on me and smashed a punch into Wooju's head. Next, it rained smash after smash onto Wooju's face. His originally chubby face was instantly beaten into a bloody mess. At this moment, I hugged the knackle from behind. Without hesitation, I bit into its neck and teared off its flesh. As expected, the evolving knackle's entire body slowly turned into a stone cocoon once again. I hugged Wooju, constantly asking about his condition, not understanding why he hadn't left. Wooju couldn't possibly choose to run away at a time like this. After speaking, Wooju passed out. If I left him here, it would only be a matter of time before the knackle killed him. At this point, it was impossible to call other team members. The only way was to kill it all by myself. It still had 3 more evolutions to go before reaching its final stage. I absolutely could not let it evolve to level 10. I had to kill it before it emerged from the cocoon each time. I smashed open the petrified chest of the knackle, seeing its heart still pulsing and evolving. If I eat this, it would only have 2 evolutions left. But in that moment, my chest was suddenly pierced by a palm strike. With my chest pierced, I also completely lost all vitality, falling to the ground with a large hole in my chest. This level 7 evolving knackle looked even more imposing than before. However, the condition for evolution was triggered, and my body began to petrify. The knackle grabbed my head with one hand, hoisted me into the air, and then forcefully threw me far into the mountain forest. Seeing the evolving knackle approach the unconscious Wooju, I was powerless while suspended in midair and still petrifying. I didn't know how far I was thrown before I finally stopped, but the moment my evolution was complete, I dashed wildly back in the direction I came from, praying in my heart that Wooju must be alright, and after evolving, I clearly felt my speed had increased by a tier. With this, I should make it in time, but when I hurried back to the spot spot, I found that not only were the knackle and Wuju missing, but even the surrounding yellow dust had dissipated. Just as I wondered where they had gone, my phone in my pocket suddenly vibrated. It turned out the evolving knackle had moved to another area, thereby triggering the alarm. Subsequently, Team Leader Deokman-go called. He said a level 7 knackle alarm had gone off on G Island, and told me I must stay at home and absolutely not go out. I was just about to explain the situation clearly, but the call was hung up. However, this was good in a way. Now that the alarm sounded, everyone would be rushing here. Right now, I just needed to find Wuju and move him to a safe place. At this moment, a ringing alarm sound came from the bushes behind me. I stepped closer to look, and sure enough, it was Officer Wuju. I hurriedly stepped forward to ask if he was okay, but when I turned his body over, I found my hands were covered in blood. Wuju was laid on the ground like a bloody mess, completely motionless. I was somewhat stunned, and cold sweat poured uncontrollably. In almost an instant, I picked up Wuju, and then yellow dust began to continuously spew from my mouth, hoping to use the healing ability knackleists possess within yellow dust to keep him alive. But at this point, Wuju had entirely lost his vitality, with no possibility of self-healing. I took off my clothes to cover Wuju's body, and a surge of fury continually erupted in my heart. Meanwhile, Chanakong had already arrived on the mountain. Deokman-go, who was on the phone with her, was still driving here. But at this moment, the alarm suddenly skyrocketed straight from level 6 to level 10. Just at that moment, a loud boom echoed from the mountain. To ordinary people outside, it felt like an earthquake. At the same time, the off-duty members of the G Island team, everyone was also rushing here at top speed. But Chanakong believed she could no longer wait for the other team members. She had to stop this knackle before it went down the mountain. Before long, she saw a figure amidst the thick yellow dust, but she hadn't expected this figure to actually be me. Upon seeing Chanakong arrive, I immediately roared at her, telling her not to come any closer and to quickly head down the mountain. Chanakong asked what I was saying, and when did I get here? I took large strides toward her, my decision unchanged. I loudly told her to hurry down the mountain, and that I would handle the battle here alone. Realizing something was off about me, Chanakong told me to calm down and asked what exactly was going on. I quickly ran through the previous situation with her, and explained that this was an evolving knackle that had already evolved to level 10. Chanakong's face showed instant shock. The level 10 evolving knackle was in clear view. Before that knackle evolved to level 10, were you fighting it all by yourself? Hearing this, I could only tell her this was my responsibility to bear. It's my job to kill it. Without hesitation, I aimed the wooden spike in my hand at my own heart. Chanakong promptly stopped my action, confused as to what I was doing. Expressionlessly, I explained to her that I had eaten this knackle's flesh. As long as I sustained a fatal injury, I could evolve just like that guy. Chanakong broke into a cold sweat. If I was acting different, then something must have happened. She wanted to just stall for time and wait for the others, but I didn't need anyone's help. So you're just going to casually pierce your own heart, treating death as a game? How is this any different from losing one's humanity? But this time, I didn't heed her advice. I thrust the wooden spike directly into my own heart. This scene left the battle-hardened Chanakong completely dumbfounded on the spot. My body began to petrify once again, and the scene in front of Chanakong shocked her. Just how many times did Officer Maruhan stab himself in the heart? Just as Chanakong was still in shock, the evolving knackle suddenly appeared behind her. Sensing the dangerous aura instantly, Chanakong instinctively raised her arms to block. But what arrived first wasn't the knackle's fist, but my body standing in front of her, having completed the level 10 evolution. I grabbed the knackle's fist, and with a sudden exertion of force, its arm was instantly ripped off. Splattering blood hit my face, but I felt absolutely nothing. At the same time, the knackle's other arm clamped around my neck, smashing me toward the ground. The force was so strong that the entire ground shattered. It pinned me firmly to the ground, wanting to buy time for its severed arm to heal. Meanwhile, Team Leader Deokman-go finally arrived on the mountain, and what greeted him was Wuju's corpse. Damn it, how could this happen? But just then, the rumble of a tremor came from the mountain forest behind him, and at this moment, Chanakong, who was watching the battle, had eyes full of bewilderment. This kind of Maruhan. It wasn't the version of me that she knew. I seized the opportunity and smashed a punch into the knackle's face. The terrifying force made its body stagger uncontrollably. I leaped and closed in, completely unwilling to give the opponent any breathing room. It turns out that Chanakong had noticed my expression had become so blank. I charged my fist, ready to strike, but unexpectedly, the evolving knackle's severed arm had fully recovered at this moment, landing a preemptive blow on my abdomen. In that split second, my body felt like it had been hit by an artillery shell, flying wildly through the forest like a launched missile, crashing into a massive mountain rock. Seeing this, Chanakong instantly slashed her palm open, preparing to join the battle, but was stopped by the arriving Deokman-go with one hand. Chanakong, you are absolutely no match for a level 10 knackle. We can't have anyone else die. Hearing that someone had died, Chanakong was full of disbelief, but Deokman-go only gripped tighter. Team leader Deokman-go was beyond furious. He had clearly instructed me to stay at home. On the other side, inside the S-City headquarters building, Yang Eun-yu asked in sheer disbelief. A level 7 to level 10 knackle appeared on G Island. The Ice City headquarters director, Gumak-ji, on the other end of the communication, answered that it was true. She had received team leader Deokman-go's contact and had also immediately immediately dispatched people to provide backup. But to prevent unresolvable situations from arising, the purpose of her call was to brief Il De-jong in advance. Reclining in his chair, Il De-jong said calmly that it had been almost 2 years since the Sirak Mountain incident, and this was the first time a level 10 knuckle had appeared since then. At that time, the Sirak Mountain team was completely wiped out, and civilians suffered massive casualties. Il De-jong told her not to worry, the G Island team shouldn't reach that point. After all, they had the level 10 knuckleless Diakman Go. Besides, there was also that guy Maruhan. At this moment, I climbed up from the rubble, with only one thing in my mind, to defeat this evolving knuckle. After closing the distance to the knuckle, I directly leaped and ready to punch. Seeing this, the evolving knuckle showed no fear of battle and similarly readied its strength. At the split second the fists collided. A powerful shockwave rippled out from the impact. However, the evolving knuckle's fist was stronger, completely obliterating my own arm, exploding into a mist of blood. Subsequently, I was grabbed by the throat with one hand by the knuckle. Diakman Go knew he could no longer stand by and watch, preparing to activate his ability. Just then, my legs suddenly clamped around the knuckle's waist. Then, swinging my mangled stump, I shoved the entire severed arm right into the evolving knuckle's mouth. At the same time, my mouth rapidly spewed yellow dust, activating my incredibly fast healing. At this moment, my severed arm regenerated at an impossible rate. In an instant, the fully regenerated arm thrust right out of the knuckle's mouth, blowing its head apart. Team leader Diakman Go could not believe this method of attack. After pulling my arm out, I directly bit into the opponent's neck. As I forcefully tore off the flesh from its neck, the evolving knuckle could no longer regenerate from this injury. The battle to the death could finally be finished. But all of this was far from enough. Even though the opponent was dead, I continued to rain punches down on its head. Even with team leader Diakman Go calling out to stop me, I still couldn't stop. It wasn't until Chana Kong severed the corpse's head with a single blade strike that I stopped the punching motion. Seeing this, I finally saw my hands tremble. Chana Kong held me, comforting me that it was all over. At this time, Eden Sianwoo and Officer Jaiwan Yin also just arrived at the scene. They thought it was the team leader and Chana Kong who had killed the knuckle, but Diakman Go told them that I resolved it all by myself. Hearing this, Eden Sianwoo couldn't believe how this was possible. At this moment, my lifeless eyes could only stare up into the sky. The next day, at Wooju's memorial service, his parents cried until they fainted. The G Island team members collectively lowered their heads in silent mourning. Chana Kong asked Diakman Go if he was alright. Diakman Go said that for some reason, he just could never get used to this. Chana Kong then asked how Wooju's accident was ultimately classified. Diakman Go sighed, saying it was the same as always. Headquarters processed it as a tragic accident. Luckily, he wasn't eaten by a knuckle, so his body was intact for the funeral. It seemed G Island would no longer be safe in the future. Where is Maruhan? Is he still refusing to answer calls? Diakman Go affirmed this. Since submitting my resignation, I hadn't communicated at all. It would probably have to be reported to headquarters tomorrow. Chana Kong hoped Diakman Go could give me a little more time. She would try to persuade me, but Diakman Go told her decisively that Maruhan wouldn't come back because he had been through the same thing, so he could understand. When Diakman Go was in S City, he also encountered a level 10 knuckle. That mission resulted in the annihilation of his entire team. He was the only one who survived, and after witnessing the deaths of his comrades, he could never bring himself to return to that scene again. Meanwhile, I locked myself in my room, trying to numb myself with alcohol and isolation. But at this moment, a crack suddenly split open in the void of the wall behind me. Then, a bloody arm reached out from it. As the person continued to exert force, the spatial rift gradually widened, and the person who stepped out from it was precisely Director Il De-jong. He had some matters he wanted to discuss with me. I asked him confusedly how he got in. Il De-jong came straight over after finishing killing Knuckles. I heard you've been locking yourself at home, refusing to see anyone because of Wooju. Are you here to hold me accountable? Il De-jong denied this. Wooju's death was due to his lack of sufficient strength, but I couldn't understand how this director could say this kind of thing. He was more worried about my state. You can't end up like your dad, Suwon. You know my father? It turns out that the director and my dad served in the same battalion. At the time, they had both just become squadron leaders. The first appearance of a knuckle happened while they were on a mission together. That was a night in 1999. Il De-jong and my father, Suwon Han, received a special mission from their superiors, which was to head into the mountains to deal with these unknown monsters, now known as the Knuckles. It was a knuckle clad in ancient armor, wielding an iron halberd. Their current weapons had absolutely no effect. Suwon Han commanded the battalion to concentrate their fire. However, the younger Il De-jong was frozen still. Snap out of it. Squadron leader Jong, deploy the 6th Battalion. Meanwhile, their teammates were dying one by one. As a last resort, he ordered everyone to use their explosives, and countless grenades flew above the knuckle's head, exploding in a great flash of light. But as the smoke cleared, they saw the knuckle was still standing with half its body blown up. Soon enough, it charged at the battalion once again, killing multiple people simultaneously. In that first battle with the knuckle, Il De-jong and Suwon Han's squad was entirely wiped out. Only the two of them survived. That battle left them with a massive psychological damage. They still didn't understand what exactly that monster was, but shortly after the battle ended, yellow dust unexpectedly filled the surroundings once again. Suwon-han was startled. He realized it seemingly wasn't over yet. He fiercely started running in the direction the yellow dust was spilling from. Seeing this, Il-de-jong chased after him, only stopping when they reached deep into the forest. Just as Il-de-jong asked him what had happened, he saw a monster covered all over in eyes. Il-de-jong told Suwon-han to get away from that monster quickly, but Suwon-han turned his head expressionlessly and said that if they wanted to survive, accepting this guy was the optimal choice. Il-de-jong stepped forward, wanting to pull him back, but as he got closer, a rift split open in the space before him. As the rift continuously expanded, a pair of smiling eyes was revealed. Next, a hand suddenly shot out from it, piercing directly through Il-de-jong's entire body. That's when the knackle attacked me, but you know what happens next in this situation. After the knackle's blood entered his body, he gained abilities. It turns out that he gathered knackleists similar to him to form the Special Civil Service, and my father was one of the first individuals that he came to. But after gaining knackle abilities, Suwon-han lost his mind due to the stimulation. At that time, Suwon-han only had one goal. He wanted to go to the abyss. Hearing this, I remembered a specific memory when my father forced me to fight the Devour Knackle as a child. He said the exact same thing. Your father felt that since he couldn't defeat the Knackles, he would just become a Knackle himself. What does becoming a Knackle mean? The bodies of us Knackleists basically all have Knackle blood flowing through them. In other words, we are carriers of the Knackle pathogen and can enter the abyss to become Knackles at any time. When the conversation ended, it was already midnight. I looked at my father's photo, unable to help but wonder, did my father truly become a Knackle and enter the abyss? Before leaving, director Il-de-jong left me one final reminder. If I gave up fighting Knackles, he would consider me a Knackle from that moment on, and he asked if I was going to abandon humanity just like my father did. The next day, at the G Island base building, seeing that I still hadn't come to work, Deokman-go planned to head to the I-City headquarters to submit my resignation letter. But the moment he stood up, Chana-kang stood up as well. She asked the team leader to hold on, as she still wanted to talk to me. Just at this moment, I walked in, my face full of shame. My appearance took the breath out of the room, but I had decided to continue staying in the organization to uncover the truth. I couldn't believe director Il-de-jong's claim that my father became a Knackle. At the same time, Il-de-jong stood in front of a massive vessel. Locked inside the container was a colossal creature with wings. The preparations were almost complete, and he would soon see the abyss. At this moment, the working atmosphere of the G Island team no longer had any laughter. It was a gloomy, dead silence. To break this atmosphere, Jai Wen-yun offered for everyone to go out for a meal together. I refused, claiming I had no appetite. In the end, only a few members joined her. Jai Wen-yun confided in a back him that ever since the Wooju incident, Maruhan had been constantly depressed, which was truly worrisome. But Chana-kang knew that it wasn't just me. Everyone in the team was very down, and the atmosphere was simply awful. At night, using cooking as an excuse, Deokman-go asked me to go down and throw away the garbage, carrying several full bags of trash. I had just opened the door when I ran right into Chana-kang, who was also just leaving her apartment. It turns out that it was close to the office and convenient for dispatching on missions. Moreover, it wasn't just her. Even Officer Jai Wen-yun and Officer Abakim lived in this building. After saying that, she helped me carry a few bags of trash. There's no need to do it on your own. You don't need to blame yourself for what happened to Wooju. This is the collective responsibility of our G Island team. I lowered my head, telling her not to comfort me. This isn't comfort. I want you to overcome it, because everyone here gets by this way. The people of the G Island team gathered here after losing someone precious to them. Early the next morning, the level 6 yellow dust alarm suddenly went off. Deokman-go immediately assigned Jai Wen-yun, Yoseok Nam, and me to handle it. Hearing this, I lethargically put on my clothes. Eden Sinwoo noticed my depression. He raised his hand at this moment, offering to go in my place, his words still unrelenting. If you send him and he causes trouble, then what? As soon as he said this, my condition worsened. But Eden Sinwoo knew that a guy as depressed as that was simply unsuited for missions. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the scene. Officer Jai Wen-yun asked Eden Sinwoo to watch his words around me, but Eden Sinwoo dismissed this, putting on his gloves and prepared to search for the source of the yellow dust. But just then, a tiny seed suddenly pierced his forehead. Following that, he passed out. When he groggily woke up, he saw a red knackle approaching the unconscious Yoseok Nam. Seeing this, Eden Sinwoo immediately snapped a finger to activate his ability. The red knackle's head was instantly snapped off. How could this level 6 knackle be so pathetic? They seemingly have confirmed the kill at this time. Then, Yoseok Nam was suddenly startled after spotting something. Under the big tree in front of him lay an orange cat. He stepped forward and picked it up right away. This cat looked exactly the same as his own cat, Champs. But how did it end up here? Holding it tightly in his arms, he said he was going back to the office to get it some good food. Hearing this, Eden Sinwoo wanted to stop him, but saw Jai Wen-yun wave her hand, telling him to let it go. Later, back at the office, Yoseok Nam held the orange cat and showed it off to everyone. Look at what I found on the mountain. Chana-kang and I turned to look, and our expressions instantly froze in shock. Chana-kang shouted at Yoseok Nam to put it down immediately, because that thing was not a cat at all, but a knackle. But just as she said that, the knackle suddenly broke free from Yoseok Nam's arms. Several seeds shot out fiercely from its body. These seeds hit Chana-kang, Kong, me, and Officer aback him squarely in the forehead. Following that, this knuckle quickly crawled outside. Yet in Yoseok Nam's eyes, it was still an orange cat. Yoseok Nam closely followed behind it. When he entered a corner, the scene before him made Yoseok Nam's pupils instantly dilate in shock. A giant door had actually appeared here. Deokmin Go, who had just finished using the restroom, was also hit by the knuckle seeds. Therefore, Deokmin Go gathered everyone together. You're the one who brought the knuckle back from the mountain, right? After saying that, everyone's gaze turned to Yoseok Nam. I thought it was my own cat. Champs, let's debate right and wrong later. Since there's yellow dust in the office building, it means the knuckle is still inside. They should find out what was behind the door, and everyone should be on alert due to the possible illusions. When everyone walked in, they were utterly shocked by everything here. If this was an illusion, it was far too realistic. At this moment, Chana Kong warned everyone that there was a knuckle right in front of them. We saw a completely red spider knuckle. At its feet lay a young boy and a woman. Seeing this, Jilin Yun's expression instantly froze in shock. A memory came to her, a child calling out its mother, because this young boy was exactly her son, Min. She rushed forward without hesitation and tears. This was the first time she had encountered a knuckle, and her son died right then. Chana Kong held her back, yelling for her to calm down. That wasn't real, it was an illusion. She guessed the knuckle must have used something to pierce their foreheads, read their memories, and crafted the illusion. This was the power of the reproduction knuckle. Confused, Maruhan pointed at the spider knuckle and asked if that guy was also a phantom. At this time, Eden Senwa put on his gloves. This guy should be real, likely recreated using the knuckle data in their blood. Hearing this, Maruhan couldn't help but recall director Il Dejong's words. Basically, all knuckleists have knuckle blood flowing through them. That means all knuckleists are carriers of the knuckle pathogen. Thinking of this, I suddenly roared that this knuckle could recreate the knuckles that gave us our abilities. Chana Kong supported this theory. Whether it was team leader Deokmin Go's level 10 knuckle or Maruhan's Devour knuckle, they could all possibly appear. Therefore, this was an unimaginable crisis. If they didn't find and kill the reproduction knuckle that caused all this, things would become far trickier than expected. Hearing this, my heartbeat surged uncontrollably. If we didn't kill the reproduction knuckle, it meant the Devour knuckle would appear. And if the Devour knuckle appeared, how could any of us survive against it? Don't worry, no one will die here. As long as we protect each other, it won't be a big problem. At this moment, Chana Kong and Eden Senwu had already charged toward the spider knuckle. Under their seamless cooperation, that spider knuckle was completely taken out in no time. This was the absolute power of two level 7 knuckleists. With the death of the spider knuckle, the surrounding scene reverted back to the hallway. A metal door slowly appeared before them again. When the door was opened, the spores filling the area made the origin of this second scene abundantly clear. This was the scene belonging to Officer Abak Kim. Jilin Yun lost her son, while he lost his wife, and the knuckle belonging to this scene was a spore knuckle currently clinging to the ceiling. By the time I noticed it, countless spores had already flown into my mouth. Next, chunks of mold continuously surged from my lungs out of my mouth. Realizing the situation was bad, I immediately looked toward my teammates, only to find that everyone had passed out due to inhaling the spores into their lungs. Knowing the situation was critical, I fought through the burning pain and ripped away the mold spilling from my mouth. I leaped into the air and bit into the spore knuckle's neck. A large chunk of flesh was torn off from the neck. Unable to regenerate, the spore knuckle completely died mere moments later. Fighting back nausea, I swallowed the flesh. However, I didn't get any additional powers because this was just a creation of the reproduction knuckle. After the knuckle's death, the surrounding scene returned to the hallway once again. The G Island team members also gradually woke up. Only Officer Abak Kim crouched in the corner, shedding tears toward his wife, who had not yet completely faded away. I clenched my fists, finally fully understanding what Chana Kong had said earlier. Everyone joined the team after losing someone important to them. It wasn't just me who had suffered so much torment, so I can't keep being depressed about the situation. Just then, Eden Senwa told me to get out of the way. This made me grind my teeth in anger. I was clearly making an important resolution just now. When the door opened for the third time, they saw a young boy standing in front of a door. This so-called door was a gate connecting the abyss to the human world, and this young boy was precisely Eden Senwa before his awakening. What they had to face next was the level 7 effigy knuckle. They saw the young Eden Senwa walk up to the effigy knuckle, yelling for it to give him knuckle powers, to give him power greater than his father Il Dejong. You lunatic, did you actually ask to gain abilities yourself? Eden Senwa explained that only by doing this could he fight his father. Facing the boy's demands, the effigy knuckle merely snapped one finger, and young Eden Senwa's thigh suffered a violent blow. The effigy knuckle stepped in closely and threw a punch. Seeing this, the real Eden Senwa activated his ability. He didn't want the upcoming embarrassing scene to be seen by others. With a crisp sound of a bone snapping, the effigy knuckle's readied fist was instantly broken. Eden Senwa continuously activated his ability, planning to take it out in one go, but unexpectedly, the effigy knuckle abruptly extended its left arm at this moment. At the same time, countless palms suddenly all cracked simultaneously, and the bones all over Eden Senwa's body suffered a pulverizing blow. Next, his body gave a jolt and he collapsed onto the ground. Seeing this, Chana Kong and I hesitated no longer, and dashed toward the effigy knackle. Right behind us, Jaiwan Yun and Deokman Go also instantly prepared to activate their abilities, but the effigy knackle managed to act first, spreading out the palms covering its entire body. The fingers all over its body snapped simultaneously. The bones of Chanakong and the others were pulverized in an instant, and they fell to the ground one after another. I was no exception, lying on the ground trembling uncontrollably from the pain. This effigy knackle was indeed way too strong, but because my recovery speed surpassed everyone else's, I was also the first to recover. However, mere moments after standing up, I was struck by several snapping attacks again. Unable to move, the evolving knackle's ability couldn't be activated because my recovery power was too strong. This high recovery rate actually became a hindrance. I wanted team leader Deokman Go to activate his ability, but Deokman Go was recovering too slowly and couldn't even lift his arm right now. Seeing the effigy knackle approach the others, spreading its arms ready to execute them at any moment, the long silent Eden Sin was suddenly crushed his back molar to activate his ability. The effigy knackle's left arm was instantly twisted and broken. At the same time, the not yet fully recovered Chanakong fought through the pain and dashed forward with her blade drawn, delivering a slash to the effigy knackle's other arm. But this slash was very shallow. Due to her bone fractures, she couldn't exert much force at all. The next second, Chanakong's neck seemed to be grabbed by something. Following that, her entire body flew into the air, hovering suspended as if supported by something invisible. This scene left me watching with utter shock, and Eden Sinwa's expression was much the same. Who noticed something was wrong? Chanakong wasn't hovering in the air. It was caused by the blood flowing from the effigy knackle. The blood formed invisible arms that others couldn't see, currently coiling around and lifting Chanakong in midair. But the next second, Chanakong's limbs were subjected to severe twisting. The intense pain caused Chanakong to let out agonizing screams. Seeing this, I charged forward without hesitation, but before I could get close, I was grabbed by an invisible hand, and just like Chanakong, I was lifted into midair. Eden Sinwa was now certain that this attack method was a kind of invisible hand. If the effigy knackle that gave him his abilities had that power, then Eden Sinwa absolutely possessed it too. Eden Sinwa let his blood flow continuously. Then he activated the exact same ability, controlling the invisible arms to slowly entangle the effigy knackle's body. Seeing the opportunity, Eden Sinwa shouted a signal. Following that, a sharp spike pierced through the knackle's head. The one coordinating with him was precisely the spider controlled by Jaiwan Yun. After the effigy knackle was dealt with, the group lying on the ground finally breathed a sigh of relief. It was thanks to this reproduction knackle that Eden Sinwa gained a deeper understanding of his own abilities. However, the roar that came from the next door made everyone's expressions jolt and shock. Chanakong guessed that this scene was likely my Devour knackle. As I opened the door, the scene inside, just as everyone expected, was indeed the Devour knackle. The moment everyone saw Devour knackle, they were utterly shocked. Unlike common knackles, this Devour knackle actually possessed eyes. This meant that Devour knackle was on a completely different level from the knackles they had encountered before. In the scene, my childhood self was dragged toward the Devour knackle by my father. Only this way can you enter the abyss. If you want to protect those you love, you must obtain the Devour knackle's ability. With the recreation of this scene, I finally realized something. Director Ilda Zhang's previous words were false. It seemed like my father did not lose his humanity after all. But why would the director lie to me? Meanwhile, inside the S-City headquarters, Ilda Zhang flipped through the roster of newly appointed knackleists with some dissatisfaction. Due to the excessively high frequency of knackle appearances this year, the number of new knackleists had significantly increased, but the quality was truly too poor, with very few at level 7 or above. Then what should we do? It's not like we can forcibly produce high-level knackleists. Ilda Zhang steepled his fingers, having intentions that they could do it if they please. Are you asking me to intentionally delay deployment times in order to spawn knackleists from among the victims? Director Ilda Zhang, do you know how treacherous your ideas are? Just then, the office door was suddenly knocked on. The assistant secretary reported that they had lost contact with the G Island team. It's the G Island team again. Go find out why we lost contact immediately. Did they clock out early just because they had nothing to do? Little did they know, at this moment, G Island was facing the Devour knackle. They wanted to clock out early more than anyone else. Unexpectedly, merely moments after the scene recreated itself, Yozia pointed towards the Devour knackle. Its entire body began to gradually disintegrate. In the bewildered gazes of everyone, it turned into a pile of dust and disappeared from the spot, as if this space couldn't withstand Devour's manifestation. Although they didn't know what had happened, it was a good thing they didn't have to fight Devour. When the scene returned to the hallway, another child called out to his sister. Needless to say, this fifth recreation scene was Chanakong's iron knackle. Chanakong told everyone to wait behind the door and not move. This time, she intended to resolve it all by herself. Despite my desperate attempts to dissuade her, Chanakong didn't waver, walking behind the door alone. However, I couldn't completely relax. Even Eden Sinwa barely beat his knackle. I opened the door a crack to peek at the situation inside, choosing to observe for now. Behind the door, Chanakong was already engaged in a fierce battle with the iron knackle, but not far from their intense fight, another knackle was actually present. Just like the Devour knackle, this knackle also possessed eyes. At this time, Eden Sinwa also leaned in to look. With just one glance, Eden Sienwoo's pupils revealed a bizarre look of shock. Shortly after appearing, the second knuckle, just like the Devour knuckle, had its body gradually disintegrate. Chana Kang's fight with the Iron Knuckle was also very intense, but soon, Chana Kang gradually fell to a disadvantage. Seeing this, I anxiously called out to her, but Chana Kang told me not to come over. She had to defeat it alone. But what I wanted to do was point her attention to something. This Iron Knuckle had manifested armor, meaning Chana Kang should be able to do the same thing. As soon as his words fell, the door was slammed shut by Eden Sienwoo. Now, all they could do was wait for the battle behind the door to end. A while later, a bloody hand pushed the door open. Witnessing this scene, I broke out in a cold sweat. It was none other than Chana Kang's Wen, having evolved her mastery with her Iron Knuckle powers. Nearly exhausted, Chana Kang plunged headfirst into my arms, and then completely passed out. Now that the Iron Knuckle had been dealt with, that only left the Akmengo's and Yoseok Nam's knuckles. But even after half a moment, the door that should have appeared still hadn't manifested. Eden Sienwoo guessed that the knuckle they first met in the mountains was likely Yoseok's. After all, that guy's abilities were similar to Yoseok Nam's. Yoseok then realized that when he went into the mountains to look for champs, he encountered a knuckle. But there was another problem. What about team leader Deokmengo's Darkness Knuckle? Deokmengo said nonchalantly that maybe the reproduction knuckle forgot about him. However, the team simply didn't think this explanation made any sense. In any case, Yoseok Nam was relieved that they didn't have to face a level 10 Darkness Knuckle, and team leader Deokmengo was simply glad that everyone was alright. Seeing this, I shared the team leader's sentiment. Everyone here had faced tragedy, and I need to keep that in mind. At this time, the yellow dust began to dissipate, and there were no more sign of the reproduction knuckle. Maybe Chana Kang killed the reproduction knuckle inside. Deokmengo suggested they first take Chana Kang to the hospital, and everyone should go eat pork belly to celebrate. But as soon as he said that, I smashed a punch into his face. For a moment, all the team members were startled. I grabbed Deokmengo on the ground, claiming that this guy was actually a knuckle. Jai Wen-yun stepped forward in confusion, asking what I was doing. I explained to her that this guy was not our team leader. The team leader had pork belly yesterday and got an upset stomach. There was no way he would eat it again today. The moment these words came out, everyone had a sudden realization. Consequently, they all started kicking and punching Deokmengo. Unable to bear it any longer, Deokmengo hastily called for them to stop, saying he had something to say. But the moment he stood up, he bolted outside, running onto the road outside. He was hit by a car driven by the real Deokmengo. Realizing he had hit someone, Deokmengo quickly opened his car door, only to find a knuckle resembling an infant gradually dissipating on the ground. After returning to the office and thoroughly reviewing the situation, Deokmengo finally realized what had happened. When he went to see the doctor for his upset stomach, a knuckle had infiltrated the G Island team. If headquarters found out, they might face a year's salary deduction, so he demanded that the team members must keep this a secret. After work, Eden Sienwoo sought out Chana Kang. It turns out that the second knuckle in Chana Kang's memory, he had seen it before, and that knuckle, it was likely the same person as his father, Director Il Dejong. It turns out that 20 years ago, a young Eden Sienwoo asked his mother where his father was. To this, his depressed mother told him that he was in the basement, and added that he doesn't care about their family. When he joyfully went to the basement to find his father, wiping the frosted glass clean, a look of terror showed on the child's face, because he saw that exact same knuckle in the basement. Because Eden Sienwoo was very young at the time, he wasn't very clear on the truth of the matter, but after seeing Chana Kang's past, he was certain. However, Chana Kang still refused to believe that Director Il Dejong was the murderer of her entire family. Yet Eden Sienwoo firmly believed it, because his purpose for becoming a special recruit was to gain enough strength to uncover his father, Director Il Dejong's, secret. He became a strong knucklist in order to go to S-City headquarters to keep an eye out on his father. However, Chana Kang didn't believe a childhood memory was enough. They needed more evidence. Hearing this, Eden Sienwoo knew they had to make a plan to prove it. The next day, at the S-City headquarters, they dragged me along to confront Il Dejong. Still, I complained why I was getting involved in Eden Sienwoo's foolishness. Upon seeing Il Dejong arrive, Eden Sienwoo cut straight to the chase, asking if he was present when Chana Kang acquired her knuckle abilities. This straightforwardness completely shocked me. There was no build-up at all. Chana Kang followed up. There was a knuckle with eyes back then, different from all the other knuckles. I had heard that knuckle was you, the director. However, Il Dejong deflected, claiming they had been influenced by Eden Sienwoo. He had blamed his father for her mother's death. I was even more dumbfounded. This was my first time knowing of their familial relationship, but Eden Sienwoo had never attributed his mother's death to his father. He only wanted to unmask the true face of the person before him. Eden Sienwoo ordered me to produce yellow dust, so that he can reveal what his father truly is. Hearing this, I realized that was why they brought me along. However, Il Dejong warned that if I spewed yellow dust in a non-combat situation again, I would no longer be able to stay on the G Island team. Just as I hesitated, Chana Kang stepped forward. Although she wanted to know the truth of that day, she couldn't use me like that. It was exactly this statement that made me make my decision. It meant that Chana Kang would find out the truth of that day. Considering this, I stood next to her as equals, and unhesitatingly produced yellow dust as Eden Sienwoo requested. Eden Xianwu instantly activated his effigy powers. The glass behind Il Dejong shattered accordingly. Next, without hesitation, he pushed his father off the high-rise building. However, Il Dejong seemed to accept this kind of fate, falling down to the ground without a reaction. This was a massive gamble. If Il Dejong was not a knackle, then without yellow dust, he would certainly die. However, Eden Xianwu remained sure, telling us to keep watching. Finally, director Il Dejong decided to act. This is such an annoying turn of events. Watch out, he's incoming now. Just then, a spatial rift appeared above the three of us. Il Dejong emerged from this spatial rift, and it turns out, he was also capable of spewing yellow dust. Their suspicions were completely confirmed. At this moment, Yang Eun-yu and the brothers Nero and Namble, who had come to report, happened to witness this scene. Looking at the yellow dust continuously pouring from Il Dejong's body, her expression involuntarily hardened. Chana Kong explained to Yang Eun-yu that she had something to report regarding the director, that the director was related to her family's passing. Are you three the only ones who doubt my identity? Seeing that we didn't answer, Il Dejong realized he had guessed correctly. Having said that, Il Dejong slammed a palm onto the ground, and a powerful surge of spatial energy instantly rippled outward. In the next second, everyone was transported to an abandoned construction site. Director, just what are you doing? Il Dejong claimed that there was no other way, and he would dislike it if his office got too messy. With a flick of his hand, he unleashed a spatial slash that seemingly cut through everyone present. Yang Eun-yu, quick to react, immediately yelled for everyone to drop down and dodge. Just as her words fell, a slash that tore through space swept right over their heads. Fortunately, thanks to Vice Director Yang Eun-yu's warning, they dodged in time and survived. Yang Eun-yu questioned Il Dejong in bewilderment. What the hell was he doing? Il Dejong told her he was excising the rotting parts within the organization. Some kids saw things they shouldn't have seen. You, Nero, and Namble should have been a great asset in the fight against the Abyss. But unfortunately, you have been infected by the rot. It's also good to eliminate Maruhan here. After all, if he joins the Abyss it would be quite troublesome. Why would I join the Abyss? But during this conversation, Il Dejong stealthily tore open a spatial rift. Who knows? After all, humans are too weak. But just as his words fell, an arm suddenly emerged from the space behind Eden Xianwu and Chana Kong. The next second, the heads of both of them fell instantly. This was the unreasonable instant kill and overwhelming dominance of a spatial knackleist. The first thing their comrades' deaths brought to everyone was not anger, but a deep sense of powerlessness and suffocation from the depths of their souls. At this moment, Yang Eun-yu finally revealed her knackle ability. She thrust her arm violently into her own chest. Then, she forcibly grasped and stopped her previously vigorously beating heart. At the exact moment her heart stopped beating, time in the entire space was forcefully paused. This is one of Yang Eun-yu's abilities, time pause. And using her time knackle powers, she sacrificed 5 years of her lifespan to rewind time to 5 seconds prior. As frames of scenes continuously reversed, the timeline returned to the moment just before Il Dejong prepared his assassination. About to repeat his assassination move, Il Dejong acutely sensed something was wrong. He waved his hand, abandoning this useless attack, because he knew Yang Eun-yu had used the time knackle power. But Yang Eun-yu still tackled Chana Kong and the other to the ground to dodge immediately after the time rewind. Just then, I called out to the vice director. I just saw 2 people die, but how are they still alive now? Yang Eun-yu understood how director Il Dejong could do it, but why could I perceive the traces of her using her ability? Just then, the brothers Nero and Namble charged toward Il Dejong. Their patience had reached its limit, but as they closed in, their fists landed softly on empty air. Stepping onto a spatial rift, Il Dejong passed right through their bodies, walking straight toward the still-stunned Eden Xianwu. Eden Xianwu gritted his teeth in hatred. You killed me just now? As a father, how could you do such a thing to your son? Il Dejong's hand was instantly twisted into a mangled mess from Eden Xianwu's ability. Because I am not your father at all. After speaking, a spatial blade instantly condensed at his fingertips. Reacting swiftly, Chana Kong and I tackled Eden Xianwu before the spatial slash could slice through his head. If you don't want to die, pull yourself together. Having recovered, Yang Eun-yu quickly issued combat orders to everyone. Bring the director Il Dejong alive. There were many questions that needed to be asked. The brothers Nero and Namble also revealed their abilities at this moment. Blood-red threads began connecting from their fingertips. After activating the twin knackle powers, their speed and strength would double from their original states. The brothers unleashed their opening attack, but with just a casual wave of his hand, he severed the opponent's head. But to his surprise, Nero's incoming fist still landed on his face. The decapitated Nero not only didn't die, but laughed loudly, saying this actually worked. As long as the bloodline connection wasn't severed, they wouldn't die. Having figured out the mechanics, Il Dejong unleashed another spatial slash with a wave of his hand, attempting to completely sever the thread of their bloodline connection. But this attack was completely ineffective. The bloodline connection cannot be severed, because this is the blood is thicker than water bond of kinship. Namble's head, which had fallen to the ground, politely thanked the director for his efforts, while his body continued to throw punches in advance on the director. Knowing he couldn't do anything to the brothers, Il Dejong simply focused entirely on dodging. Watching this scene, Eden Xianwu understood that Il Dejong was using dark space teleportation to evade all attacks. Chana Kong beside him told him that the brothers Nero and Namble's goal goal wasn't to attack the director, but to use the unseverable bloodline threads to trap him. Seeing the bloodline threads wrapped all over Il-de-jong's body, Nero and Namble began to reel in the net. They pulled the threads tight on both sides, completely immobilizing Il-de-jong in place. Yang Eun-yu quickly ordered to attack Il-de-jong's arms. Chana Kang stepped forward, severing one of his arms with a single blade strike. Eden Sianwa followed closely, activating his ability to fracture Il-de-jong's other arm into a twisted rope. Yang Eun-yu's orders were decisive and effective. Her goal was precisely to disable Il-de-jong's arms first so he couldn't use his abilities. Seeing Il-de-jong spew yellow dust from his mouth to heal his wounds, Yang Eun-yu again ordered me to use Devour to bite Il-de-jong, preventing his injuries from healing. Receiving the order, I immediately pounced on Il-de-jong, but Il-de-jong, who was supposed to be in a hopeless situation, revealed a bizarre smile at this moment. This faint smile sent a chill down my spine. They saw Il-de-jong's body begin to undergo a frantic transformation until a familiar black face was revealed. Sure enough, Eden Sianwu and Chana Kang. Their suspicions were completely correct. Meanwhile, I was enveloped by a massive, dense spatial energy. I was being pulled into the dark space. Il-de-jong also officially revealed his true form as the spatial knuckle, and this form was more imposing than anything they have ever seen. The moment his black face was revealed, the entire space fell into a deathly silence. He never intended for the vice director to see his true form. Meanwhile, Eden Sianwu understood that knuckle in front of him was not his real father. However, Il-de-jong also hadn't expected the day would come when he had to personally destroy this group of warriors he had created. Hearing the word created, Chana Kang's entire body froze instantly. With a devastated expression, she stared at the director she had once revered. Il-de-jong revealed that he was the one who summoned the knuckle to her house and caused the massacre. As an elite athlete, he knew that Chana Kang would become a strong knucklist. The moment he finished speaking, Chana Kang's body shot explosively toward him. Seeing this, the spatial knuckle slowly extended an arm. Following that, the flesh and blood all over Chana Kang's body began to gradually disintegrate. In an instant, her entire upper body was completely stripped away, turning into a blood mist. The spatial knuckle had literally deleted the space in front of him. Even Yang Eun-yu, standing behind her, couldn't save her left arm. But with the ticking sound of time, Chana Kang's stripped body slowly recovered. Her body also stepped back, returning to the state before her attack. This was precisely Minister Yang Eun-yu activating the time knuckle's ability, rewinding time back to 5 seconds ago once again. This time, she grabbed Chana Kang's arm in time, yelling for her not to launch an attack rashly. Doing so would just be throwing her life away for nothing. Then how do we defeat that guy? But Yang Eun-yu herself didn't know the answer to this question, because with his change in appearance, she clearly felt that the director had become even stronger. Relying solely on these team members, there was no chance of victory whatsoever. But Chana Kang felt that if anyone could do it, it could only be me, Maruhan. She asked if there was a way to bring me back, but for anyone locked in the dark space, there was absolutely zero possibility of getting out. Meanwhile, I was in the darkness, running wildly without direction. Even though I was panting heavily from exhaustion, I still couldn't see an end. But suddenly, a beam of light illuminated my eyes. I looked at the distant starlight and slowly approached it as if seeing hope. When I got closer, I found a naked man. This was the real Il-de-jong. Sensing someone approaching, Il-de-jong opened his eyes. He was in utter disbelief. How could a human appear here? I explained that I was locked in here while fighting a guy who looked exactly like him. What exactly is that guy's true identity? Il-de-jong told me that the guy outside was a knuckle that had escaped from the abyss. As a knuckle, how could that guy have eyes? More importantly, how could it speak? Il-de-jong explained that because it was a higher existence than knuckles, known as the Eight. They were also the 8 knuckles who had received the authority of the King of the Abyss. Unlike knuckles, who only had the instinct to kill, they possessed their own hearts and wills to act. They possessed the King of the Abyss's abilities. It was an overwhelming power. When encountering the 8, the only way to survive was to pray they wouldn't attack you, because ordinary knuckleists couldn't possibly defeat the 8. At the same time, the battle outside was like a game of cat and mouse. All Chana Kang and the others could do now was protect Yang Eun-yu, who had the time ability. Their bodies were stripped away time and time again, not knowing how many deaths they had experienced, nor how much lifespan Yang Eun-yu had sacrificed, or how many times she had rewound time. Her beautiful face had become incredibly aged. The spatial knuckle mockingly asked Yang Eun-yu how many more times she intended to rewind time. Rather than struggling futilely, it was better to just die directly for a quick end. But hearing his words, Yang Eun-yu's heart couldn't help but tremble. She couldn't bear to think that the former Special Civil Service had been slaughtering knuckles under the orders of such a monster. Seeing Yang Eun-yu so determined, a smile appeared on the spatial knuckle's face. Since they intended to keep playing, it had to show them something interesting. After speaking, it raised its hands high, letting a surge of spatial power ripple through the air. Next, gates leading to the abyss appeared one by one, and these gates completely surrounded the group. Amidst the shock, countless knuckles surged out of the gates frantically. Chana Kang and the others immediately assumed combat stances, protecting Minister Yang Eun-yu in the center. In a defensive circle, they continuously slashed and killed the knuckles swarming from all sides. After playing for a short while, the spatial knuckle grew bored. It decided to eliminate them along with the appearing knuckles to end this game completely. Just a second ago, two Nakles preparing to charge at Chanakong were instantly sliced through the waist by suddenly appearing spatial energy. Two spatial energy waves had swept past both sides of their defensive circle, but as the spatial Nakle turned its hands, the two spatial energy waves began to cross and merge. Given the hopeless situation, they felt like this was truly the end. But just as they thought everything would end here, a human figure suddenly darted out from one of the giant gates. Moments ago, inside the dark space, I still had so many questions. What exactly is the spatial Nakle's goal? As one of the 8, why is it fighting against Nakles? It turns out that from the moment the spatial Nakle escaped the abyss, it became the enemy of the king of the abyss. It intended to lure humans inside to wage a war against the abyss. In other words, the entire organization of the Special Civil Service was merely the spatial Nakle's army. So, if we just kill the spatial Nakle, does that mean the war with the abyss is over? Il-Dejong rejected his idea. It was all too late. Humanity was already at war with the abyss. Hearing this, I was completely stunned. Then, I asked Il-Dejong if killing the spatial Nakle would allow him to reclaim his body. As I said that, I grabbed Il-Dejong, wanting to take him out. It turns out that Il-Dejong's will had been bound here and couldn't leave. But Eden Sinwoo, your son, is still waiting for you outside. Hearing this, a glimmer of light sparked in his lifeless eyes. His face became extremely gentle. Are you saying my 5-year-old son, who's in kindergarten, is here too? Hearing these words, my heart was shaken. It meant that Il-Dejong has been trapped here for that long. After just a brief conversation, Il-Dejong's consciousness became extremely weak, yet he still murmured that he had to go find his wife and son. I told him to hold on. There had to be a way for the both of us to get out. Il-Dejong told me it was impossible to get out of here. But the moment my words fell, a hand suddenly landed on my shoulder. A Nakle with a wide open mouth was preparing to bite my neck. But in the next second, I reacted instantly, blowing the Nakle's body apart with a single punch. I was a bit confused as to why a Nakle would appear here, but recalling the massive Nakle invasion incident from earlier, my mind became clear. I remembered the director had taken all the appearing giant gates into the dark space. Perhaps, as long as I found a giant gate, there would be a way out. But when I stood before the door, I hesitated to make a choice. I didn't know what would be behind this door. But right now, if I wanted to get out, this was the only method to try. Thinking this, I walked straight through the giant gate. Behind the door was a crimson space filled with yellow dust. This was the true hellish world, known as the Abyss. The terrifying concentration of yellow dust nearly caused my mind to collapse, but the sound of comeback echoing pulled me sharply awake. The moment I stepped into the Abyss, I was sensed by the king of the Abyss. Its green eyes pulsed a menacing energy, and every Nakle present looked towards my direction. Just then, the ground began to shake, and I looked towards the origin of this rumbling. It turns out a massive wave of Nakles were charging straight at me. Seeing this, I turned and ran. But in this unfamiliar space, where could I possibly run to? Just at this moment, I spotted a gate in the distance. Without any hesitation, I leaped toward the direction of the gate. Right before the Nakles pounced on me, I managed to pass through the gate. This golden tunnel eventually returned to the human world. Seeing my teammates in a critical situation, I descended from the sky like the dawn. The fist in my hand had been ready for a long time, but unexpectedly, my appearance was also noticed by the spatial Nakle. Right before my fist struck, the spatial Nakle was already behind me. Seeing my unexpected appearance, the spatial Nakle looked at me menacingly. Seeing me, everyone exclaimed my name. Is everyone still okay? Leave this for me to handle. However, Eden Sinwoo demanded I stopped acting foolish, because this spatial Nakle was far too strong. However, I disagreed, because I was stronger now, more than ever. I know I can do it. Meanwhile, the spatial Nakle was curious as to how I got out of the dark space. Just then, a green light shined behind the spatial Nakle. This energy came straight from the gate I had emerged from. Being engulfed in this energy, the spatial Nakle was extremely worried, because the king of the abyss had finally found the traitor, this spatial Nakle. It turns out that the green energy originated from the king of the abyss's green eyes. This green energy began to take over the spatial Nakle's black-colored hands. Looking below his figure, he saw the real Il-Dejong standing below him, like a perfect mirror. The spatial Nakle knew it had to close the gate, and the countless gates that had appeared began to dissipate. Yang Eun-yu recognized that the Nakle are running away, and that all the gates were closing. The spatial Nakle let out a defiant roar, and this was met with the imposing aura of the king of the abyss's green eyes, until finally, everything was quiet once again. As a result of this, the spatial Nakle had actually lost some of its power. Seeing this, the spatial Nakle could only blame me as it unleashed another attack. A slice of spatial energy traveled towards me. Everyone present was in shock, telling me to get out of the way. However, my severed head completely flew off my body. Just as the vice director Yang Eun-yu was about to activate her Time Nakle powers once again, Chanakong grabbed hold of her arm to stop her. She pointed the vice director's attention towards me still, because my evolving Nakle's powers had achieved its activation condition, petrifying on the spot. With a crack of the petrified shell, my evolved self emerged once again. I charged right at the spatial Nakle, but it only flicked its finger to the side, erasing a line of space within me, cutting me in half. Vice director Yang Eun-yu couldn't believe her eyes. The spatial Nakle continued to strike me, and yet I kept getting severed and evolving my state. The twin brothers could hardly believe I was human. Meanwhile, Eden Sinwoo let out an knowing smirk. At this moment, I had already left a trail of evolving knackle cocoons in my wake. However, now was the last time, and I had already arrived so close to the spatial knackle. Seeing this, the spatial knackle swiped with his whole arm, calling for me to die. However, I actually managed to duck underneath him, and I resolutely told him no. Finally, I came close enough to bite with all my might into the spatial knackle.